that the audio-visual system is not functioning absolutely perfectly. We don't need to be concerned about that. It will do all the things we need it to do, but it will be very important that people put their microphone on when they speak, and also, in particular, turn it off when they stop, because normally it's possible for the hidden hand upstairs to do that for us so that it works okay on the live stream, but this time it won't. So it's down to us to make sure we put it on and put it off again. And the other request I've had made is could people try and speak as strongly as possible into the microphones, because there are some members who have soft voices and other members who have less than optimal hearing, and it's not always easy to follow. So with that organisational bit done, I'd like to go to item 1 on the agenda. Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. There are apologies from Councillor Osborne, from Nitin Patel and Christopher Walkinshaw.
Thank you. And I think we've had a note that that James Rolfe has a meeting at... He's not here yet. Okay. So when James
Chair,
Rolfe...
we've just had a message saying he's running a little late, so we'll join in as soon as he can.
And he's also got to leave at 4, so that's just to be noted. Declarations of interest, if you know of any at the moment. If not, later when we get to items. Don't see anything. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Have there been any items of accuracy identified, Nick?
Thank you, Chair. It was noted that the date of the next meeting for today's meeting was incorrect, and it should have read 20th of February, so that will be updated.
But as you're all here, you really knew what it was, didn't you? Okay, so if there are no other points, may I sign those as a correct record?
Yes.
Thank you. Done. Item 4, questions from members of the public, and we've got 11 of them split between various items on the agenda. One on Madingley Road, 4 on the Greenways overall programme, and 6 on the Fulbourn Greenway item. They've been published on the website, and we will call those when we get to each item. Item 5, petitions. There haven't been any. And that brings us to the first substantive item, which is number 6, the quarterly progress report. So I'm going to ask Neve to present that, and then I'll talk about how I'm going to organise it.
Thank you, Chair. So unusually in this report, we're not asking you to comment on any specific proposed recommendations. But one thing kind of to point out, I think that might be helpful, just around the GCP Gateway review. As we kind of discussed last time, I know some members are keen to be kept updated. We've submitted the paperwork that we were asked to submit to government before Christmas. That's in the machine now, and we expect to have some kind of formal feedback on that, after which we have been told to expect a decision on funding in the spring. Other than that, we have no more details, but as and when we get them, we will let you know as soon as possible. We've got substantive items on skills and smart, so I won't point to any of those sections, Tim, in the paper just yet. Happy to take your questions.
Okay, so as Neve says, there's no decisions that the board is limbering up to on the basis of this report, and so it is questions and comment from us on the matters in here. I'm proposing that we go through this work stream by work stream so that we keep contributions of like kind together. And I am going to pass over at this point the skills work stream and the smart work stream, because I think it would be much more logical to cover what they say along with the items we have later on our agenda on those. So the first of the work streams I am calling for any contribution is the you've mentioned, is the Gateway Review. Okay, let's turn over.
Sorry, Tim, I was hoping to raise a question on the overall finance position, which is just before the Gateway Review on page 29. It's indicating an underspend for the year of £8.3 million. I was always told as a young civil engineer that an underspend is as bad as an overspend. An underspend is implying that somebody else can't spend the money if it's programmed in like that. And with construction inflation as it is that a good position for the GCP to be in, and should we not be doing something about it?
Okay, thanks, Graham. Niamh.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Wilson. I think I wouldn't disagree, but I think on a programme of this scale, on a £1 billion programme, it's not unexpected that we see this level of underspend. Some of the pinch points are explained in the paper, and we've got all shoulders to the wheel to address some of those issues.
Thank you. Heather, you were indicating.
Yes, so when it comes to the Gateway Review, I appreciate it's at the beginning of the process, but with local government reorganisation, we're looking at unitarisations that in itself would affect the GCP potentially in how it's put together, how it's represented. So just wondering if there's potentially the Gateway Review, anything we know that things might get held up while they look at the governance arrangements as a whole.
Thank you. Niamh?
We've had absolutely no indication of that, but if we were to get it, we'd let you know as soon as possible.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the... Oh, sorry, Heather.
If I could just come back on that. I thank you for the answer that it's not yet. I just can't help but think it's going to be happening. We just might not be aware of it. Could I put a request in that actually we have it sort of on the agenda for the next meeting if there has been any murmurs, and just to do some modelling as to how it would impact, for example, we currently have members from City Council, County Council, District Council. It would just be one unitary potentially for the whole Greater Cambridge area. So if we can sort of look at the modelling, and so that we're not caught, we don't find out too late and then we can't act appropriately, if that makes sense, because that's what I fear we'll find out a bit too far down the line.
Niamh?
Absolutely understood. Thanks, Heather.
My own view is that what the government's thinking about with unitarisation is actually something that we're a precursor to in the way we're operating. But obviously we'll look out, as you've suggested. So I'm going to the transport work stream now, which is together with Appendix 1. Are there any questions in relation to that? Okay.
I had a question about the transport financing, 7.7. Is that appropriate now, or are you coming to that?
No, that's in the transport work stream, so
Yep.
go ahead.
Okay, generally speaking. It's paragraph 7.7, and it deals with Eastern Access. Is it possible to provide a little more detail there, operational detail on where we are with the designs and following through of the designs?
Peter?
We can send that out. We'll send that out with the minutes.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions on the transport work stream? Very good. Okay, that's unusual, but I'm not going to force you. So the skills one we're going to pass over for the moment, and the smart one we're going to pass over for the moment. And that brings us to the housing work stream and the appendix on page 30, on page 48 to 49. Are there any questions or comments on that? Heather?
Thank you. It's obviously something that I've picked up on a lot over the years, and it's green, and I really am pleased to see that because I'm a big fan of rural exception sites. However, we have now got a situation where both, the joint trajectory, we've lost a 5-year land supply. So just wondering what we can do to try and help, because exception sites tend to be the first things that fall by the wayside because people will just put in for full planning permissions. So just wondering what the dialogue's like with the planning authorities over it and how we're looking to address those difficulties.
Thanks, Councillor Williams. So I absolutely understand your point, and we are in active dialogue with planning colleagues on it. We might bring it back to the next meeting to let you know how that's going.
Okay, yes, that would be interesting, because at the moment we look like we're in quite a healthy position. Really double what our target was. So we wouldn't want that to change, I think. No. Okay. Nothing else on housing, so
Shall I just do?
do you want to say something, Katie?
So just following on from that, I know the shared planning are looking into this in a lot of detail, which is what we were due to do at this time of year anyway. But at the moment, we recognise that we are below the 5-year target. That has to be recognised. But I think it's borderline whether that will continue, because we have got a lot of projects in the pipeline that we need to find more information about what might be holding them up, and in trying to ensure that we can resolve those so that it can come forward quickly.
If I could say, it's more the land supply in relation to self-builds that seems to be a problem, because places that would normally be exception sites, because our self-build is at 3-point-something years. So I don't know how it is in the city, but in South Cambs, they are like the 2 words that I dread as a planning committee member. Maybe I ought to declare that interest.
So, through you, Chair, so I know that the shared planning are specifically looking at that, the self-build register and what's happening, because there's a lot of people on that who've been on there for a long time, and maybe that should be coming off. Yep. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Going to economy and environment work stream, which is mainly in the appendix from page 50. Are there any questions on that? Simon.
Sorry. I just wanted to say how pleased I was to see that the contract with the Centre for Business Research has been continued. I think all of those of us who have been to their regular briefings will be impressed by the scope and extent and detail of the research that they provide. And this is not available from anywhere else. And it's really important because the national data does not pick up the high levels of growth that the local economy is experiencing, continues to experience. So it's really important, and it's a really good investment. So thank you for that.
Yes, and it appears the data reported here appears to be showing that that we aren't immune from the national economic trends, but we're still outgrowing the norm across the country. I mean, one aspect of this that always intrigues me, and if ever we can get to better in the data, is the nature of the relationship between the knowledge-intensive sectors and the non-knowledge-intensive sectors, because there obviously is a difference in the picture. In a logical way, one imagines that the non-knowledge-intensive sector is largely, some of its success depends on the other, but it appears not to be completely that tight, and it would be really nice to understand that a bit better, I think. but I'm not quite sure that's a question for the statisticians, I guess. Yeah?
So that's come up, as you might expect, in some of our discussions with colleagues there, and we're trying to understand whether or not they can do that for us. So we're in active dialogue to try and work that out.
Heather?
Thank you. Two things on this. We obviously had the workshop the other day. So I think we need to be aware not just of employment statistics, but actually the job adverts. And that was something that was touched on, about the fact that the actual advertisement for roles is going down. And I think we are a good economic, growing, successful part of the country, and that's to be celebrated. But even we will not be immune. And I think we will potentially, from the trends that are showing, not have an issue with people so much becoming unemployed and for sort of businesses to go under and those sorts of things. But I think what we can see is that business are more reluctant to take on more staff and more capacity. I think that's something that's going to become a bit of a trend over the next year from what we've seen. So making sure that we're not just looking at employment rates and claimant rates, but I think that actually the key is going to be what opportunities we're given, because that will sort of trickle down the system and have knock-on effects. The second is about the electricity grid reinforcement. It's great that you're on target for the project for 2026. I think that is something that, again, if we are serious about having growth in the area, things like water and electricity, the things we often talk about, the designs of buildings and things like that, but actually the utilities are an issue. But wondering as well if we can just look about connectivity as part of that. There are ways of using the electricity grid reinforcement to help with connectivity of sort of internet and those sorts of utilities, because there is some fibre, but in the rural areas of South, and actually a lot of, you think of the biotech industries in Greater Cambridge are in the South Cambridgeshire parts, things like the Genome Campus, and phone signal is still horrendous. And internet, you can almost write off certain days. So I'm wondering if we're looking at opportunities to use that piece of work to actually see if we can get some improvements to other areas, because it's really difficult, and we're seeing a lot more of people working from home and things like that. So we need better infrastructure for connectivity.
Thank you. My recollection is that the county council work on that stream of work, does it not?
Can I take that away? Just to understand who's doing what?
Yeah, sure. Or the combined authority, maybe. Yeah. Okay, well, do clarify that for us. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Fair enough. I think if we're setting aside the skills work stream and the smart work stream, I think we've finished the quarterly progress report. So I'm going to move to the next overall item, which is item number 7 on the Madingley Road walking and cycling improvements. So I'm going to, first of all, take the public question we've got on this item, and the public question we've got here is from Josh Grantham of CamCycle. Josh, if you'd like to come forward.
Thank you, Chair. The glacial pace of the Madingley Road scheme is extremely frustrating. 4 years after the last consultation, this proposal fails to impress. While some improvements have been incorporated, other aspects have worsened or been removed entirely with little to no justification. CamCycle structured its consultation response around the following topics, and we just reiterate them here, so we feel the paper and the consultation report don't really reflect them. Firstly, reduced scope. The exclusion of the Eddington Avenue junction and the link to the Park and Ride is a major loss, making the scheme significantly less effective for those walking and cycling from Eddington or using the Park and Ride. Weaker protection for cyclists. The design now includes extended sections of stepped cycle tracks instead of fully protected lanes, making the route less inclusive and less safe. Whilst we acknowledge the constraints along the route, the design should always be striving for the highest level of protection and then kind of stepping off that as we require, rather than a kind of uniform approach. Unresolved junctions, little to no progress has been made on several of the critical junctions and intersection. The scheme is still failing to address the Northampton Street junction or do any improvements there. And the Graham Road junction fails to connect people easily and safely to onward routes. The report now asks members to note progress, yet offers no real detail on what change is being made or proposed in the final design. Section 2.4 refers to ensure consistency with planned developments, a vague phrase that appears to justify the removal of the Eddington Avenue junction, but how can continuing to limit active travel enable more development? Similarly, section 3.5 states that concerns about the project's two most expressed comments in the consultation, the geographical scope and the Queen's Road junction, will be addressed. But does this mean design changes or just words to address in action? So can the GCP confirm whether the designs will reinstate the Eddington Avenue junction and address concerns at the Northampton Street junction? Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. I'm going to ask Peter to respond.
Thank you, Chair. So the Madingley Road proposals, like the wider City Deal programme in general, need to reflect and support the growth that's coming forward in the area. That's kind of why government has set up a City Deal and give us £500 million to spend on delivering that. So considerable time and effort has been taken to ensure that the scheme complements that growth. And along this corridor, we're looking at Eddington and the West Cambridge side in particular, also conscious of the proximity to the motorway junctions, and national highways clearly have a view. What we've got in front of us are updated proposals that we've gone out to stakeholder engagement, and it should be acknowledged there was strong support for the proposals as they stand. Nevertheless, if this is then approved as the next step by the board, we will go to detailed design, and that will be subject to a full public engagement, a full public consultation process, which will then come back to this assembly for their consideration. So the project team will review the potential for the issues that Josh has raised, and they will be reported as part of the public engagement process, and then that will come back to you for your consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Peter. I think the purpose of these questions is that members may want to pick up these and pursue them in the discussion later, and this may be such a case. So I think we need to have the overall report presented to us. Peter, are you going to do that?
Yep, I'll do it briefly, Chair. So essentially, when you last considered this, we were looking at the option 2 proposals outlined in Appendix 1, and we were looking at two-way cycle improvements to Eddington Junction, and the scheme to progress to the Park and Ride site. There has been significant dialogue since then, so paragraphs 2.4 to 2.6 outline, or try and give a sense of the conversations we've had with National Highways, conversations we've had with the developers of those sites in terms of managing that growth to best effect. Also reflecting the desire around saving trees, which is something that the residents and the Residents Association have been very clear to us in terms of responding to that, and then land acquisition issues. So what we have gone out to a public engagement with, and what you have in front of you today, is a scheme that has evolved. So we're not proposing a two-way cycle route on the north of Madingley Road, because we can't fit it in without taking the trees away, and so we're looking at single direction. We're looking at very minor changes to Eddington Junction. That is because of the concerns of the growth of traffic in that location, and a need to balance that with concerns that National Highways have. And then at present, we are proposing to remove the section on the Park and Ride side. Now, that said, the next step in the process will be a public engagement. We've heard very clearly from a public consultation. We heard very clearly through the public engagement that the park and ride site section was important to people, and we will reflect on that. We've heard clearly around the Northampton Street section. That was never part of the proposals, but we will reflect on that to see whether that can be brought forward. And then we'll look to a public engagement that will then be brought back to you for your consideration. Maybe if I leave it there, Chair, and try and answer any questions people have.
Thank you, Peter. I mean, I guess that the members of the Assembly might well feel, when is it their opportunity to get to grips with the detail on this? That's clearly you're not anticipating now.
That wasn't our expectation.
Okay.
Because I think what we've undertaken was a sort of an engagement exercise, and we've caught the key feedback elements from that. Clearly, we want to try and address them where we can. But this isn't a single mode operation along Madingley Road. People will know that there are residents there who've got concerns. There are other users that we need to try and support and address at a time where Madingley Road is developing quite considerably, and we need to make sure that that's managed effectively.
Okay, so if the public consultation, which you foresee coming soon, is generating differences of view about particular features of what's proposed, that is the point at which we would be able to comment on those specifically.
That would be the expectation, because we will have gone through a detailed design process. We'll be able to bring to you, we will undertake the public consultation, and there will be different views, because that's what happens in terms of the schemes of this nature, and we will then be presenting to you some of the options and challenges and considerations that we reflect at that point, and then you will make a representation to the Executive Board on that basis.
Okay, thanks very much. So on page 67 of the papers, about halfway down, there is the 3 points that the board is going to be asked to make a decision about. That's noting the progress, including the design option change, agree to take forward the revised proposals to the design phase, and then secondly, to note the public and stakeholder engagement undertaken and agree to a full public consultation on the detailed proposals, and to ask officers to prepare an outline business case. So those are the things the board would be hoping for a steer for us on. Who wants to say something? Heather?
Thank you. I think the majority of my comments on this document are from pages 73 and 101, just to give other members a steer of where I'm looking at. So I'm going to go from left to right. Copenhagen Crossing. I have a great deal of concern about, well, the floating bus stops, which I think are complete and utter nightmare for anybody with sight impairments and disabilities. I think the one-way cycleway, I'd be interested to hear more about and have some more explanation on that, because in my mind, it becomes, having that sort of physical curb makes it, if there was an issue where a cyclist had to swerve or a road driver would have to swerve in an emergency, does it exacerbate the situation? So how safe is that, and where's it? I think we need some more on the safety elements of that. But the Copenhagen Crossing, if you have, it's just lines on the road. And what worries me is the lines are not, they're great and visible straight away. They're not as time goes on. And you're going to be in a situation where people are giving way to cyclists and pedestrians, but we already have a system for that, and it's called a zebra crossing. So is it because it's a cycleway we can't use a zebra crossing? It doesn't seem to me in the text why we have to have these junctions or crossings, which are not going to be familiar to a lot of people. People taking their driving tests now might be, these things might be included, but not people that took their tests many years ago. Even I've been driving, without wanting to nearly 20 years. Things like this were definitely not on mine. So we're introducing new things that people aren't going to be familiar of. And also, does it make it dangerous for cyclists in the fact that they'll be having to judge when when they can just go straight ahead and not stop and pause, and when not. It just feels like an absolute accident waiting to happen. It creates me a lot of anxiety just looking at the diagram. As a driver or as a pedestrian, we have zebra crossings, everybody knows what they are highly visual, and they give the people on the zebra crossing right of way. So it's not as if we're not used to that system. Floating bus stops, I think we must stop pursuing floating bus stops. For people with sight loss issues, and I appreciate that there'll be a smaller section of society, but when we sit here, we must be putting ourselves in the position of everybody that's using this. I appreciate that probably gives that small advantage to the cyclists, and I'm not opposed to there being improvement to cycle provision, but just look at it, you are sandwiching people between two sets of traffic. Okay, I appreciate getting hit by a bicycle is going to be slightly less painful than a car, but it can still have impacts, and it can also create anxiety for people leaving the home. And you just look at that picture on page 73, that small amount. So if we actually are successful in getting people onto buses, there's barely any room for them to be there. And we can see on the responses on page 101 that this is a real anxiety for people with disabilities. And I don't think that we should just be saying, carry on despite that. They might be a smaller group of society, but they have an equal voice. I think there are better ways. Yes, we can have improvements to cycling provision, but these designs are not appropriate. And let's have something that everybody understands as well, because otherwise you won't get safety for anybody with these layouts. That's my view. And also the alternatives and the diagrams. Appreciate it's really difficult because it's quite complex structures, but it's very hard to make a comparison. So actually I think that the routes and the way that they are diagrammed need to be different in a consultation, because at the moment it's very hard. You almost need like an overlay. So that's my
Thank you very
feedback.
much. Thank you very much, Heather. Claire Ruskin.
Thank you, Chair. I think starting with Josh and CamCycle always make good points to us, and they are always pushing us to better schemes. That's really good, but I also read the first word pretty much, which is glacial, and we have to accept that imperfect is still hugely better than what we have now, and we're trying to make some progress. I think Heather also makes some very good points, which we must listen to, but again, there is research on what is best practice for these junctions. We know we've got to compromise to get all users happy with what we are proposing. There are very definitely different types of cyclists. I would love to train many of them. In particular, we've got children and middle-aged, sensible people like me trundling along quite happily, and then we have first-year students who we really do need to train in cycling technique. I quite often used to tell them off and claim that they must be first-year cyclists, not anything later than that. I think it's not unreasonable to cross at toucan type of junctions, and I think it is not unreasonable for cyclists to have to stop sometimes and have a dotted line across the cyclist path, not just the pedestrians and the cars. I think all these things have been taken into account, and I'm fully in favour of us progressing to the next stage to avoid the glacial aspects of these schemes. So we must listen, we must think about compromise, and we must get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Other Claire.
This is very specifically about the floating bus stops. I just wanted to know if the experience of floating bus stops in other parts of the city has been taken into account, because they are already in operation in other parts of the city. So it'd be good to be reassured on that.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Peter to come back on those three contributions.
So in many senses, that's why we need to finalise designs and go out to a public consultation. You've heard me say this before. There is a road safety process behind this that we go through, and we will continue to take these things forward through that process. I would say that many, if not all, of these features are not uncommon on the streets within Cambridge. We've delivered a number of them And as Claire refers to, we have delivered things like floating bus stops. We continue to monitor them. We continue to await national guidance. Department for Transport, we're reviewing floating bus stops, and we are looking to hear from them what their next steps are, and that will clearly be incorporated into any final designs. But there is a sort of safety assessment process. We will go forward as you would expect us to through that process, but we will finalise designs and we'll go out to public consultation, and I'm sure we'll get different views through that process.
Thank you, Peter. Paul?
I think we do need to accept that road design does need to evolve. And the reason for evolving is to improve safety. I think if we'd said in the kind of over the past 40 years that we weren't going to evolve road design because people wouldn't be familiar with it, we wouldn't have cut the numbers of people killed on the roads from about 6,000 to 1,800. So I do think that road design does need to evolve. Obviously, it doesn't need to be so radical that people aren't able to adjust in a timely fashion, but I do think that road design needs to evolve. And kind of on that point, I would kind of speak in favour of Copenhagen crossings, because all they are really doing is reinforcing the highway code, which basically says that drivers are to give way to pedestrians crossing side roads. So, yeah, thank you, Chair.
Heather?
I think just to clarify, I'm not saying never any change, but I just think there are not change for change's sake. And one thing that should be definitely included is the maintenance, because we can set these up, we can put the lines on the road, but if they're not maintained, and that's not for our budget, somebody else the county or whoever it might be in the future, because if not, as those lines wear away, we are potentially putting people into a dangerous situation. If you look, or according to the diagram there, there's no lighting or anything like that, which you would have with the zebra crossing. Yes, we do need to make improvements, but I think we also need to take people with us and make sure that improvements are to increase safety long term. This might work in the short term, but the maintenance of these things, we never seem to talk about the maintenance of what happens afterwards, and that's where it can really go horribly wrong.
Thank you. That's of course a different point about maintenance, which applies to all features. But Katie, you wanted to speak.
I think it's a really interesting discussion, but one thing I wanted to make the point about is the speed of traffic. Many of the roads in Cambridge are now down at 20 miles per hour, and that should apply to the cycleways as well. But it's just that sometimes as the roads quieten down a bit, there is actually more, the worst speeding happens more frequently, and I think the enforcement of that, and as well as when it needs to be seen to be done at random more often, I think. But that's, again, not part of this scheme, but it goes hand in hand with these modal shifts being more successful.
I'm one of those people who isn't tired of experts. I think we need them, and I think we need highway engineers to advise us and undertake highway safety audits, so that we come to the optimal design schemes to promote modal shift, which we desperately need in this city, and highway safety. So I think we do have to place our support behind those experts. But I would say that the evidence from road traffic accident data, which is posted on the County Council's website, is indicating a problem with motorists turning left across cycleways without regard to the cyclists that are in the cycleway. And this, we think, could be due to motorists misreading how quickly the cyclists are riding, and they're catching up as the car slows down to approach the turning, and they don't realise, they don't look in the mirror, and they don't see the cyclist, and then the accident follows. and that's that the number of incidents of those types of accidents has increased since particularly on Histon Road and on Huntingdon Road as well. So that's a problem, but I don't think, at the end, there isn't a physical solution to that. It's more one of education and motorists basically getting to understand that they are not the only, they're not kings of the road. They have to have due regard to the other road users.
Thank you, Simon. Peter, anything to come back on that?
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of Paul's point on designs need to evolve, they do, and they will continue to. And we've seen that over a number of years, and particularly as they then evolve across sort of city and city region environments. So the first one can be quite difficult, but actually it becomes easier and far more understandable. In part, picking up on Simon's point, the more of these things there are, and that's in a sense what we're doing. Replicating some of the changes elsewhere. Heather, the point about maintenance is important, which is why we take all of these scheme designs through the County Council's technical officer structure, so they understand the maintenance implications of that. Katie, speed clearly is an issue. It's not part of this scheme, but that's something that needs to be reflected on. And I think that then aligns with Simon's point that it's not just engineering and it's not just speed. It's education as well, and there are a number of things that need to come together with the various agencies in our area to address these points. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Just wanted to make a comment myself. I see the time span over which this has been developed, but on the other hand, I would notice that the process of gradually honing in on something that has the maximum public support seems to be working. So I'm not claiming that the period was totally all necessary, but to see that the recent engagement showed that 70% of people were happy is something that one rarely finds in highway schemes like this. So the process of honing in on an overall optimum seems to be something that is working. And the other comment I wanted to make is that there's been a huge increase in the use of our highways by all types of users in Cambridge. And that's part of the change in our area as a whole, but we can't ignore it, and we ought to welcome the fact that that cyclists increase in that mix. And it's hardly surprising that in order to make sure that the possibility of travel is safe all round, that we do need to adapt our designs for the highway and adapt the rules for the highway. But everything I have seen is building on the principles that exist in the Highway Code, as has been said. And I don't think that any of these things are not evolutionary change for which people can adapt. And I think in the places that we've already installed some of these features in the city, it's been proven that people do and have adapted. And so I think I for one, would be very supportive of us continuing to that process of adaptation, using some of these design features where they're appropriate. I don't see any other hands at the moment. I think I would like to report to the board that we have had a discussion about these innovative designs that we've been kicking around for a few minutes. I think we should note that not everyone was convinced by them, and but others were open-minded for their use in the right places. I didn't hear any other comments about any other features of this scheme, so I'm not going to flog you to death whilst you try and manufacture them, and we'll leave it at that.
Chair, if I could set I also had a
I
point
have
about overlays and the diagrams, if you could feed that back as well.
Sorry, which point, sorry?
I made a point around the clarity of the diagrams when you're looking at different options for the consultation. If you could include that, please.
Yeah, we'll take that away as part of the consultation process in terms of the presentation.
Thank you. So we then go to the next item, which is the item number 8. That is the Greenways overall programme. And we have some public questions here. So I've got the order down of David Stoughton, Anne Miller, Josh Grantham, and Linda Worth. So I'll take you in that order and ask David Stoughton to come forward. It's 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. Cambridge Living Streets has regularly commented on the proliferation of shared footways and are concerned that the lack of any demarcation creates, especially for less able and older walkers, disincentives that reduce the likelihood that pedestrians will use them. Today, I want to draw attention to the same lack of concern for pedestrians when consideration is given to the termination of greenways in the city. There seems to be an underlying assumption that walkers and cyclists have similar destinations in mind and will travel to them by broadly similar routes. Thus, terminating at Greenway where it connects to cycle lanes and where footways are available is considered to cater for the needs of both. This ignores some key differences. Walkers have more options, using one-way streets and open spaces, for instance, and may therefore take entirely different routes, as well as possibly having different destinations in mind. Secondly, and critically, all the research shows that the condition of footways and perceived safety are the critical determinants of the choice to walk. Put bluntly, if walkers exit a greenway to find that they must negotiate broken and cluttered footways, vehicles parked on the pavement, and high levels of traffic on their preferred routes, the numbers of walkers using any greenway will quickly diminish. Will the GCP please consider ensuring that the footways on the routes most used by pedestrians when they enter or exit a greenway are in good condition and invest in improvements where appropriate, or coordinate with the County Council to do so? Failure to address this means delivering a series of white elephants from a pedestrian perspective. Secondly, when consideration is given to where a greenway terminates, will they please also consider whether walkers can easily access a route with low volumes of regular traffic? Thank you.
Thank you, David. We'll hold that thought, and could you turn the microphone? That's it, yeah. That's the trick. So I'm going to ask Anne Miller to come forward. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. As Chair of Carbon Neutral Cambridge, I'd like to say that we're very pleased that GCP is proposing to widen Burrells Walk Bridge. We carried out an extensive survey over several months of residents and users, which showed 90% support for widening it. There was 94 in favour, 9 against, 1 don't know. However, the responses also made it very clear that actually it's really important to do it properly. And this encompasses 3 things. 1, widening it enough to provide segregated paths for pedestrians and cyclists, and I'm sure Cambridge Living Streets would approve. 2, improving the sight lines at the blind junction where the Burrells Walk Bridge joins the main Burrells Walk path. That's going in the direction of the city. And 3, some biodiversity net gain measures in accordance with policies. So residents were particularly concerned that widening it to just a 3-metre wide path, 3-metre wide bridge to match the current path would not be enough to protect pedestrians from fast-moving cyclists. So, taking account of the consultation responses, we suggested it's widened to 4 to 4.5 metres, which would, I think, be enough to provide segregated paths for pedestrians and cyclists. This is particularly important as we understand that soon there will be 3,000 more homes, 2,000 more bed spaces at Eddington, and thousands more employees, researchers and students will be travelling to the new employment and research sites in West Cambridge and Eddington every day. Experts tell us that even at 3 metres, the bridge would remain a pinch point on the route, and it's exacerbated by the tidal flow due to the traffic lights on Grange Road. The second element of doing it properly is improving the sight lines at this blind junction with the main part of Burrells Walk. And this was frequently mentioned as a safety problem by residents, particularly elderly residents. From our conversations with Trinity College, who own the land at that corner, we understand that they're likely to be supportive of just some minor modifications to improve the sightlines. And the third element is biodiversity net gain, as widening a little bit more than from 3 to 4 metres is going to take a little bit of land. We think there should be biodiversity net gain improvements there, and we submitted a list of suggested improvements from the City Council's biodiversity officer, which was included in the local highway improvement scheme application that Councillor Holloway put in on our behalf to the County Council. And this enhancement of Cobbett's Corner was important to residents too. So can you reassure us, this is my question, that you'll work together with the County Council and the City Council and the University and include all these 3 elements of doing it properly on the Burrells Walk Bridge? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. I'm now calling Josh Grantham.
The decision to address Burrells Walk is welcome and long overdue. This simple yet effective change will improve access and enhance the usability of Adams Road, a scheme that we eagerly anticipate. Specifically now in regard to the Melbourne and Meldreth Greenways, in 2022, CamCycles submitted a detailed consultation response on the Melbourne Greenway. We provided 51 specific constructive comments aimed at shaping the design. And when we do this, we hope this level of detail ultimately starts a conversation, goes on to a discussion, fosters a collaborative approach, and achieves good outcomes. This collaborative approach cannot be taken for granted. Without it, we wouldn't have such schemes as Milton Road, which would be a shadow of the scheme that we have today if it wasn't for the work of the community and of key stakeholders. However, to achieve that outcome on Milton Road, CamCycle and others had to fight originally to get a seat at that table. And we do not have the capacity or often the knowledge to fight every time that the GCP enters that kind of design period and window. More collaboration, such as involvement in design workshops, would aid the GCP and the community to achieving better outcomes. Now, I've heard some positive things from local members that this engagement has been done well with certain stakeholders, so I suppose there's a kind of personal gripe about how maybe that involvement is happening specifically with CamCycle. But we always find when we enter into design processes that the more stakeholders you bring together, the more that you balance those competing demands. Whereas if you speak to road safety in isolation, we get really kind of road-centric things that can often be kind of abutting what we might need to be doing, which is get more people cycling. These papers ask members to approve changes to the Melbourne and Meldreth Greenways without any detail as to what these changes are. For example, the report mentions a need to change the surfacing from red. What exactly is this need? Is it cost, practicality? Well, trade-offs are necessary. They should be transparently discussed, not framed as non-negotiables. Good outcomes like those on Milton Road require a collaborative approach, stakeholders to strike balance, as I've said. And we need to think about how we embed this into the GCP's design process. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. And finally, Linda Worth.
Good afternoon. The detailed plans for the greenways are being submitted for stakeholder comment without any of the rights of way network being shown. For the Barton Greenway alone, it is simply not possible to determine whether the tarmac route of the greenway is actually on the bridleway or a route alongside it. It is not possible to determine whether the route highlighted for equestrian and other soft surface users is part of the rights of way network or some other piece of public or non-public land. I have asked on many, many occasions for the rights-of-way network to be clearly shown on all GCP plans, public documents, consultation material, etc. But this still has not happened. Please could the Assembly require that this information is included on all future documents and clarified for the current plans. This is about transparency to protect the rights-of-way network. We need cycle paths as well as rights-of-way, not instead of them. Burrells Walk should be available to all non-motorised users, including horse riders. There is currently a plan for a long-distance route which will be open to walkers and cyclists from Stevenage to Cambridge, which will require access into Cambridge over this path. All safe off-road access should be available to all vulnerable road users. We therefore request that equestrians are not excluded from this and other routes. I've been interested to hear the group talking today because I noted the statement reinforcing the highway code. Yet schemes are still being delivered which bring cyclists on the inside of equestrians and fast-moving cyclists at that. I noted your comment about speed restrictions. Of course, these don't apply to cyclists. So I would be grateful for the GCP to continue and extend the inclusion of equestrians on their schemes. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I'm now going to ask Thomas Fitzpatrick to take those one by one, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So first of all, turning to the question from Living Streets. So pedestrians are being taken into account within the design of the greenways and will benefit from the delivery of the schemes, and indeed are benefiting from those that we have already delivered. In terms of work beyond the routes of the greenways, the development of the Greater Cambridge Transport Strategy will be looking at walking across the city, and that obviously is going to be subject to its own consultation, hopefully late this year. The GCP remit and delivery programme does not extend to maintenance of footways beyond the greenways. However, we will work with the County Council to identify any significant maintenance that does need to take place at the end of each greenway. Moving then on to carbon neutral Cambridge with regards to the Burrells Walk Bridge. At this stage, the proposal and kind of recommendation being brought forward is to work on design for the bridge, including kind of the approaches to the bridge. We will work with stakeholders and the design will be subject to consultation at an appropriate stage. Officers take on board the points made and they will be looked at as we take the design forward. Moving on to the points made by Josh Grantham from CamCycle. The Melbourne Greenway is currently at detailed design stage and has taken in CamCycle's comments alongside other stakeholder and resident comments as part of 3 different stakeholder engagement periods and consultations that we've had. Our response to the latest engagement was clearly set out in a paper to the Executive Board alongside the outline business case in 2023. Changes are required to remove the red surfacing previously set out for the sections through Melbourne and Meldriff and replace them with physical measures such as flat-top speed humps and priority narrowing, which will be undertaken instead. This is to support both villages' 20-mile-an-hour zones. A traffic regulation order will follow with a consultation as part of its process, and we've been engaging with kind of members and parish councils as CamCycle have mentioned. GCP meet regularly with CamCycle as part of our non-motorised user group, where greenway schemes are discussed, and they have been involved in workshops on the design in the past. When the new designs are finalised, we will share the latest design on our website so that they will be available. And lastly, just turning to the question from Linda Wharf. We take on board the comments about including rights-of-way maps. The plans being talked about were shared with the stakeholder group, and we note that we will need to add those rights-of-way plans in the future. In terms of the Barton Greenway, the new path will be alongside the bridleway. It will not be over the existing bridleway. And then finally, we're not proposing any change to the designation of Burrells Walk as it exists now. In our view, the route as a whole is not suitable for equestrians with significant constraints along it. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. I would now like to invite County Councillor Susan van der Ven to speak as a member of one of our partner councils. And I think Susan represents the area of the Melbourne and Meldreth Greenway.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say a sincere thank you for the delivery of the Meldreth Station Link, part of the Melbourne Greenway. And I remember sitting here 2 years ago begging for action. So that's really, really welcome. The delivery team did a very conscientious job, and the path was delivered with little delay despite bad weather. The new path, which was opened in July, started in July, opened more recently, is very well used by Meldreth Station commuters and many others moving between Meldreth and Melbourne, especially Melbourne Village College students who walk to college rather than get driven there. I would also like to ask how plans are evolving for vegetation maintenance of the whole Melbourne Greenway, and that includes the existing A10 path between Trumpington and Melbourne, and it will get longer soon, all the way to Royston. For many years, maintenance has been significantly supported, if not underpinned actually, through local business contributions sought and managed by the A10 Corridor Cycling Campaign, working with a local grounds maintenance contractor. It's a job that needs heavy machinery. This is probably not a sustainable solution. We can't control business contributions, and they have diminished over the years. However, much has been learned in the process about what the Greenway tends to require. This is significant cutbacks just before and after nesting season, and additional work late spring, early summer, when the path can still become overwhelmed. A maintenance plan needs to anticipate these needs in order for the path to reach its potential use. A failure to maintain the path properly is reputationally damaging, and this was the case last year when we needed intervention in the spring, and also damaging to the integrity of the path fabric, including solar stud lighting, which we've found in some places has been covered by leaves for so long, by vegetation, that the batteries have failed. I would just add, it's not in my written question, but since this all began, volunteers from the community have been out either on their own initiative as individuals or planned lunchtime groups from various local businesses and community groups, and I'm sure that will continue. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. Thomas, would you like to come back on any of Susan's questions?
So firstly, just I'll pass your thanks on to the project team. I know they worked very, very hard to make sure that the project was delivered as it has been done, and it's really nice to hear that feedback. With regards to maintenance, members will be aware from previous discussions that we are working with the County Council on a maintenance plan for the greenways, and we will be requesting that county officers come to a future meeting in order to talk that through with members. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Thomas, would you go right on and present your overall report here?
Thank you very much, Chair. So this paper provides an overall delivery plan for the upcoming financial year, as well as some specific recommendations that I'll go through in a second. In terms of the overall programme, I want to highlight that we are expecting significant work this year with construction on parts of 6 of the 12 greenways, as well as planning applications which will be submitted on 5 of those. This is as well as the kind of the normal design, detailed designs that are going on, and land acquisition processes that are carrying on at the moment. In terms of specific recommendations, firstly, we are asking the Executive Board to note the wayfinding trial. So this follows the decision that was taken in June of 2023 on the design of those wayfinding kind of totems. So we'll be putting them out on part of the Linton Greenway and then be looking to get feedback on what they look like having put them out. Secondly, we are asking the board to note the changes to sections within Melbourne and Meldreth. As already stated, we're moving away from red surfacing to more physical measures in the highway. That's similar to Comberton Village, which we've completed. These are being discussed with local members and the parish councils and will be subject to a traffic regulation order. And then lastly, on the Comberton Greenway, following feedback from stakeholders and local members, we're looking to bring forward improvements to Burrells Walk and the bridge. At this stage, the work will focus on building up appropriate designs for a short consultation. We will then come back to the board at a later date to set out funding requirements and the options to move forward. Thank you very much. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Thomas. I'm proposing that we take it piece by piece, starting with the Linton Greenway wayfinding, going then to the Melbourne and Meldreth villages design changes, followed by Burrells Walk, and finally the overall programme for the year. So are there any comments on the wayfinding that's going to be sort of trialled at the Linton Greenway, which is pictures of which are on the top of page 136? Any comments on those?
Yes, I just wanted to check that they've all been put out to consultation with sight-impaired residents.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Thomas, if you just have the answer to that.
So we did a full kind of consultation a couple of years ago that went out to kind of all of our regular lists, which included those groups. And it was also run through various technologies to make sure that it was as accessible as possible in terms of the information on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Claire Ruskin.
A small point, but I allude to it quite often, is the behaviour of cyclists and walkers. So we know that in any narrow corridor, we always wish we had twice as much room. Any of our cycleways at the moment, I walk along in fear of my life because there are so many people. We as pedestrians are trained in different countries to jump to one side of the path or the other. Cyclists don't always follow, convention which way to cycle. I wonder if these are an opportunity perhaps just a little bit of guidance occasionally that keep to the left or whatever we think is the right thing to do. If you're in America, you always walk on the right. If we're here, whatever, where do we walk?
So yes, they are an opportunity, and we're engaging with the county's active travel team to see what types of messages we might want to provide on them.
And just a little one that I didn't mention is that there is no speed limit, as I think somebody mentioned, for cyclists, but there could be a bylaw or a suggestion, even a recommended, please don't go above 15, whatever.
Okay, Claire Daunton and then Heather.
Yes, complicated question. So how will this scheme fit with existing wayfinding schemes which are different but complementary? And can we be sure that there will not be confusion between the two? We already have wayfinding schemes in the city and outside the city which look slightly different and might end up being quite confusing. So has there been work to bring the two together?
And Heather, thank you.
Thank you. Just to sort of endorse what Claire was saying in relation to keep left or keep right. Even if you imagine you walk around the underground system in London, it tells you where to walk, left or right. And why we don't just stick to one side? I think that would make everybody happier. So I think that's definitely something that could be easily done and implemented and would just help. Sometimes it's just that visual reminder. And also on restrictions, I think we need to be a lot more aware of the fact that there are electric motors on bikes now. A lot more people are starting to use electric bikes, and therefore there is increased speed, there is increased risk with that, and you've got the batteries and everything else. But also, I don't imagine this is so much of an issue in the city where you've had greenways before, but in the more rural areas we have a lot of issues with track bikes. So we have it in my village where people come down the Stret, which is the old Roman road, which essentially is sort of similar way, it's a bridle way. So they don't have to have licence plates or anything like that on those roads. And then you come to like the road where they're meant to stop and get off their bike and then cross the road, and then because they're not a licensed vehicle, inevitably they don't, and we've had several fatalities on the 1198 because of that, because they just whiz straight through. So I think also being really clear as to what is roadworthy and what is not, what is suitable on there, and because sometimes you have mopeds as well start using these greenways. We all know that shouldn't be happening, but I don't think it hurts for us to do that enforcement, because a lot of people feel very nervous walking on the Stret, particularly if you've got dogs and things like that, because you don't know if you're going to have a drag bike just come straight past you, which can be quite intimidating.
Before I'm going to add one of my own to this list of things that we want people to stop and read before they, we must make sure that it doesn't become unmanageable, because in a certain sense, the more you load onto these advisories, the less any part of it gets any traction. But I mean, one thing that I believe is really important is mutual visibility, and I use that term carefully rather than to point fingers at any particular mode, but it applies not only to cyclists who are often criticised for not having all that they should in terms of lighting, but actually in terms of some of these greenways, there is advice, I think, that is important that people have about walking, because frequently in the dusky conditions, that they aren't visible, and so to make sure that they are by wearing something reflective or something like that, it is common sense in a way, but it is still surprising how many people don't realise how invisible they are.
I think there was a comment about the wayfinding, checking people can read them properly. I think we should do that with younger school children and young adults as well, because we want to get them on board as early as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas, any reactions?
Yes, so I mean, in terms of the information that can go on the wayfinding as a whole, I mean, I think it's important we work with the county to understand what messaging is being put out there across the county, so it's consistent, and therefore kind of we'll take guidance from them, but we recognise that it's an opportunity to put out messages. I think just coming back to the question that Councillor Daunton had, so the technical teams have done site visits and walked the whole route to choose where the different wayfinding totems would be. Where there are different wayfinding schemes in place, they have kind of engaged with those kind of owners. So, for example, on the biomedical campus, to try and ensure that we are complementing rather than causing confusion. And that's how we will kind of continue as we go through the detailed design of schemes. I think that probably covers it, unless there's any other points.
Thank you. I'm going to go now to the another part of this report, which is the part on the Melbourne High Street and Meldreth route, the changes that are proposed there. I'll ask for contributions on that, but I think was there something left from the CamCycle question earlier about are people clear how and why some of these changes occurred?
So in terms of the removal of the red surfacing and the change, I think there have been a number of developments, both from whilst we've gone through the technical assurance with the County Council on what should be maintained and what should be used in those settings, as well as the kind of evolution of 20-mile-an-hour zones. We work during detailed design with various stakeholders, including the police, as well as the technical teams, about what should be put in place. It's seen that a measure of kind of speed reduction measures, physical speed reduction measures, is the best solution to ensure that 20 mile an hour is adhered to in those areas. And that's why that change has been made. And the designs, as I say, we've worked with local members and the parishes on those.
Other questions, comments on this? No? Well, we talked Melbourne.
Yep.
Oh, Katie.
So when the TRO for 20 miles an hour is brought in, does that still exclude bikes and I know that the Busway Act, when that was before the busway came in, they did explicitly say that bylaws could be brought in along the tracks, but I don't think there's any bylaws have ever been brought in regarding the busway tracks. So what's the process for bringing in bylaws that could help control speeding bikes?
I'll have to take that away and come back to you. I'll come back with a written response.
Okay. Fine, well, we'll leave the Melbourne and Meldreth route now and go to the next part, which is the Comberton Greenway, Burrells Walk, where we had some questions. So, contributions on that? Karen?
Yeah, just to give my very strong support for the improvements at that junction there and that space. It is very dangerous. I've cycled it many times, and I think, you know, those improvements need to happen, especially as there's going to be even more traffic if the other schemes are successful coming through there. So very strong support for that, please, to go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Any others? Simon?
Well, this was a scheme that was originated from this joint assembly. So we've got a sense of ownership of this, and we need to do the best possible job. Because the points that has been made, and they've been made well by the people who made representations here this afternoon, is simply this, that it is the main route from the city through to West Cambridge side and through to Eddington itself, and it's by far the safest way to travel by bike and walk. So it's already a very busy route. It's only going to get busier. No one's mentioned the incline, which means that cyclists do speed up along this stretch. So I strongly support making it even wider than originally proposed and improving the sight line. And I look forward to the redesign coming back to us in due course, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Claire Ruskin.
Again, it's a real junction for bad behaviour of pedestrians as well as cyclists. So in my view, a pinch point is not always a bad thing. A pinch point can be a pause point, and that could be part of the design thinking, not by preference, but just we have got to have people slow down sometimes. The other comment is, I think Anne commented on the biodiversity. That is a beautiful corner, has lots of pretty flowers and trees and everything else. It shouldn't take any more funding to do that. I think it could be just let's have some flowers there. And the other comment is I've never seen a horse on Burrells Walk, and it would cause enormous alarm and panic, I think, with a lot of people. So I am personally not supporting that we spend a lot of money making that equestrian special, but that's a personal view, having cycled along there and walked along there a great deal. A horse would cause me great alarm there. It is just too crowded. But
I think you might not be the only one thinking that. Heather?
I think it should be explored. It might not be what people know, but if there is a way of making it accessible to everybody, I don't see any harm in that being explored. If it is significantly more expensive, or what that then that's a different conversation. But it should at least be part of the conversation, and we should be trying to support as many people as possible. Horses can be in crowded areas. They regularly are in London and other places. I appreciate it might not be the norm, but lots of things aren't. For a lot of people in my area of Cambridgeshire, more people probably ride horses than they commute, and that they're paying their taxes into organisations and local authorities just the same as everybody else. So I don't think it is right to be so sort of dismissive of that request by the reaction that was actually held in this chamber, not to the comment. I appreciate what you're saying from a safety point of view. The reaction from others in this chamber was not one of safety, and I don't think that was appropriate, Chair.
Well, that's your view, but I'll leave others to say what theirs is. Anyone else would like to speak on this? Okay. Anything you would like to come back on there, Thomas? Thank you. And so we get to the overall work programme for the year. Are there any comments on that? Oh, several. Heather, do come back again. Tell us.
Thank you. So we've all had correspondence, and if we go to page 137, or this tiny two-sentence paragraph, 2.9, in relation to the Haslingfield Greenway in Grantchester, I do think that it feels a bit of a waste of resources to be fighting this through the courts.
Could I just cut in on you there, Heather, because I think we've been advised that it's best not to refer to this item on the basis that it is under legal, in a legal procedure, and therefore I'm going to suggest that we leave the item as read here and let it be resolved by the way it's being processed.
Okay,
You recently took a decision on the on this Haslingfield Greenway.
Is that
at
advice that was
Grantchester,
given
and
in writing, Chair, to all of us?
I had no idea.
Yeah, I haven't received advice saying that on
Okay,
the paragraph
I'm
within
giving
the
you that
report,
advice,
I
Heather.
cannot discuss
Giving
it.
you that advice, Heather. It has been subject to legal review. That is where whatever's going to be decided will be decided, and we're not going to grandstand that process here this
I'm
afternoon.
not seeking to grandstand, Chair.
So
I'm
I'm going to
seeking
ask you
discuss the
to
report
resist the
as it is
temptation
impossible
to
discuss
comment on
something
this
in the
item.
report. May I ask why it's in the report?
Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I'm trying to discuss paragraph 2.9 within our report.
If you ask a question, ask it.
Right. Well, you just said that I can't ask, so can I or can't
Well,
you?
you were
Again,
giving
can't-
us,
if
you
I
were
cannot
grandstanding
ask a
another
question
process.
on what is in the report, why is it in the report? I suppose that's my first question. Secondly, is there any way in which the alternative can be costed, and are we going to actually see what costs, what money, what taxpayers' money is being spent on this disaster?
Chair, if I may.
Leave that on the table, I think, because, Peter, do you want to?
Yeah, so this information called publicity quite recently, and we're aware that correspondence went to members of the Assembly. So the two lines are in there by way of update. No further comment will be made because we're subject to legal proceedings.
Thank you very much. Can we ask for comments on the year's programme for the Greenways? Are there any? I've got Karen, I think, next.
I'd actually been going to ask a similar question to Heather about what the risks were in relation to it. I didn't realise that we weren't allowed to speak about it. I hadn't received that information. Apologies.
Neil.
Thank you very much, Chair. And my comments are in line with the overall project. And here we have a beautiful diagram in figure 1 that shows these greenways in isolation, but of course they're not. And every time we put in a little piece, it forms part of a network, and I think we shouldn't lose sight of that gestalt, if you like, and the way that this interacts with all of the other bits and pieces. And of course we talk about commuting into the city, when in fact people commute out, you know, and also there's a little line here that says about countryside access and leisure. But of course, people do access the countryside for shopping and for interacting with farm shops and fitness and training and all of these other things, and of course, horse riding. And it's the adding all of these routes together, and also the access across town. So where you might start in one part of the city and want to go to the other side and go out. So a lot of these routes look like they just stop, and then there's nothing in the middle, which is, of course, not the case. And again, this comes to Linda's question about public rights of way, and this is also an instruction to us on the county. Often it's very difficult to find running routes or ways that, the ancient ways that we used to join up our towns and villages, and this should be very much part of this project as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Neil. Any other comments? Paul.
Yeah, I do have a question that applies to the Greenways as a whole, or yes, a request for assurance, I think. I raised at the last Assembly meeting that an issue had arisen with the Mereway, which could be termed a Land Beach Greenway, but that's an aside, which had recently been brought forward and finished by a developer, where unauthorised motorised vehicles had been using it. That issue continues. It is dissuading residents from using it. For example, a parent has said that their son should no longer cycle down it to Cambridge Regional College for safety reasons. They are cars using it, motorbikes, quad bikes. A single barrier, wooden barrier with a padlock was clearly inadequate because it's been removed. As a local member, I am discussing it with County Council and District Council officers, but I think there is a point here that we do need to consider in the design of the greenways ways of mitigating this risk at the entry and exits from the greenways, because we don't want a situation where we build them and people are frightened to use them. So I think what I'm just asking for is assurance that this is being considered in the design of the greenways.
Thank you, Paul. Thomas.
So first of all, just coming back to the point made by Neil about being a network, I mean, we understand that this is part of a wider network. The Green and Blue Infrastructure Strategy did look at a lot of that mapping in terms of where the different greenways were linking into, and that work is going to be taken forward again as part of the Greater Cambridge Transport Strategy as well. But it's something that all the project managers are aware of and are looking at. In terms of the issues on the Mereway and how that could impact greenways. So the active travel design guide that the County Council has developed includes some information on access controls. Mostly that's kind of bollards, but they do say kind of specific routes can be looked at with county staff in terms of what should be done, and that will be addressed in the detailed design of each of the schemes. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Oh, Claire.
I was just actually going to make almost the same point as Thomas. I think it really will be very helpful to overlay this diagram with the county's active travel diagram and see where the overlap is and where the connectivity is, because I think this diagram makes clear the linear development of the greenways, which is after all what they were about, but it's the connectivity between greenways, which is really important, and it's something that in my own area is lacking but could come in the future. Working together with the County Council, I think that would really make a significant difference across the whole area. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul?
Yes, I think one of the challenges that we have with the greenways at the Assembly is it is very difficult to scrutinise the routes in detail. I think we appreciate that. It was raised at a previous meeting that maybe we could engage with Active Travel England. And I think it was agreed by officers that could be done. It would be a useful thing. We are talking about a very significant development of infrastructure of around about £80 million, and perhaps that is something that could be done. I was just wondering if there's any kind of update that you can provide on that.
No, any other points? Okay. Thomas?
Yeah, so we met with Active Travel England and we've agreed a process where we basically sent them a spreadsheet of all of the schemes broken down kind of by sections, and we've set out which ones will need to have kind of in effect audits by them over the time. So that's actually beginning in the next week. I think we've got a first one, which will be the detailed design of Adams Road on the Comberton Greenway. So we are starting that process and we will be engaging with them going forward.
Thank you. Thank you. So on this item, to draw this to a close, I think that we, as I've heard it, we have supported the decisions that are being proposed in relation to the content. I think we've added to them in some respects by asking for further elaboration, for example, on the wayfinding strategy. On Burrell's Walk, we've made some sort of specific points, and we've just talked about the importance of relating the greenways into a wider network as well. So I would propose that we send those comments along to the board. I also want to suggest that we take a 5-minute break at this point. We've got 3 items left, and that would appear to be about halfway. So if we could start again, let's deal with round numbers 20 to 4 then. The next item is item 9, and that's the Fulbourn Greenway. And we have a number of public questions here, which I'm going to take in 2 blocks. The first block, in this order, will be Darren Green, followed by Linda Jones, followed by Andy Kennedy. So could I call on Darren Green to come forward? Okay. Please go ahead when you're ready. You've got 3 minutes, Darren.
Lovely. Thank you, Chair. So this is a question about the rerouting of the Greenway along Mill Road. And with the bus gate in operation and Mill Road attracting active travel, will the GCP consider expediting the work on Mill Road as part of the Fulbourn Greenway and consider bringing forward this work to phase 2? And if necessary, that may mean swapping phase 2 and phase 3. I do realise that would leave a bit of a gap in the middle for a while. So what I'm asking is whether the Mill Road phase can be done in place of the planned work from Yarrow Road to the A1134 if necessary. I think the benefit of this is it change in scheduling will be that it may be the quickest way to repair the very poor condition of Mill Road. It's a detriment to cyclists, and it will also be the quickest way to promote active travel along that route. So that's part 1 of my question. And part 2, with the expectation that Mill Road is going to become a popular active travel route, what specific actions will GCP take to ensure that the route along Mill Road is going to be felt to be safe and viable for the most vulnerable road users, such as children cycling to school? Thank you.
Thanks very much. And now I'll call Linda Jones. Go ahead when you're ready, Linda.
Thank you.
3 minutes.
My question is focused on phase 3, which is when the Fulbourn Greenway gets to Mill Road. So it's in the future, so there's lots of time to do stuff about it. Cambridge Living Streets welcomes the proposal for Fulbourn Greenway to be routed along Mill Road East through Romsey. It's the most direct route, and with careful investment can become a safe and attractive route for pedestrians, wheelers and walkers, as well as cyclists. Some stretches of the road further along towards the Mill Road Brooks Road junction have houses with narrow pavements and hardly any frontage, and this area needs special attention to make it safe for pedestrian movement. Pedestrians need to be catered for as befits the major mode of transport on all of Mill Road, and a group designated by the Department of Transport as the top of the transport and active travel hierarchy. Of course, a key issue then arising is why no provision is being made to improve Mill Road West, Petersfield, where pedestrian traffic is so much greater. The average daily pedestrian flow in February 2025 was 7,491 pedestrians, which is over 3 times higher than in Mill Road East in Romsey. Cycle traffic, 3,891, was over twice as great as in Romsey. People walk and cycle to the station from Petersfield too, yet the assumption is that their safety can be ignored. Some pavements in Petersfield are very unsafe on the north side because they are so far too narrow, with stretches waterlogged in winter, and on the south because of pavement parking and street clutter. Moreover, because of car and taxi movements to and from the station, the level of motor traffic is likely to remain quite high and add to pedestrian exposure. We ask the GCP Assembly to look again at plans for Mill Road and to invest in the whole road. The Petersfield stretch has a wide range of shops, cafes and restaurants which attract people from around and beyond Cambridge and bring economic benefits to the city. Most of these people don't drive, they walk or cycle. Safe, active travel is surely as important for them as for pedestrians and cyclists in Romsey. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Could you put the microphone off? Yeah, thanks. Next I've got Andy Kennedy, Secretary of Mill Road for People.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here representing Mill Road for People, a community organisation based mainly in Romsey and Petersfield, and to talk about the Mill Road proposals for the Fulbourn Greenway. Just like to start by welcoming the decision to make that move from Greville Road, as was originally planned, onto Mill Road. Makes a huge amount of sense with the restricted traffic volumes that we're now seeing. So great, well done for doing that. I'd just like to make a plea for some serious investment in Mill Road. This could really be an exemplar for what's possible when you reduce traffic and how you can restore life to an area that's previously been clogged up with 14,000 motor vehicles a day. And there's a real opportunity for local businesses to take advantage of the situation we now have. And I'm pleased to read in the report that there is an intention to do that. We've got words like pavement widening, continuous footways, improvements to areas of public open space through the introduction of new planting and sustainable design features. My concern, and that all sounds great, but my concern is the extent of the available funds, really. We're talking about transferring the money that was allocated to phase 3 in the previous plan via Greville Road, which is a back street and presumably wouldn't require very much investment to make it appropriate for a greenway, to a transformation of Mill Road. And it just seems to me that the 601,000 in the report is really not going to be adequate. And I'd ask the GCP to work with the other funding bodies to find the money to do a real job, and not to go out to consultation on this, on a good scheme, when they don't have the financial wherewithal to deliver it.
Thank you, Andy. So we'll now pause and ask Thomas to respond.
Thank you very much, Chair. So just to the question from Darren Green, just making sure that is definitely the first one. Yes, it is. We understand that local residents and stakeholders will be keen to see this work brought forward as quickly as possible. However, phase 2 has already had a considerable amount of design work completed, and therefore it is significantly further forward in its development, with a consultation to be carried out this year, as has already been noted by this board previously, or the Joint Assembly and the board previously. The recommendation at this stage is to change the route of phase 3 to go down Mill Road. No design has yet been developed. However, safety will be a principle of the design, with vulnerable users a key consideration. We'll be working with key stakeholders, and the design will be subject to a consultation. Moving on to the question from Linda Jones of Living Streets. So the recommendation being put forward today is to realign the Fulbourn Greenway, which runs from the A1134 to the railway station. That project, which is part of the City Deal delivery programme. We do, though, recognise that wider aspirations exist for Mill Road from stakeholders and residents. That's reflected in the recommendations that we will work with key partners such as the County Council and the CPCA to consider the wider ambition for the road. And then finally, moving on to Andy Kennedy from Mill Road for the People. The aim is to design a scheme first so that we can then understand the cost. We've committed to working with stakeholders in developing this design. Once the design and cost are understood, a further paperwork will then be provided to the board. At this stage, no additional funding is being sought. This is only the funding available from the Greenways budget. However, we will work with the County Council and the CPCA, as well as the City Council, to review opportunities for funding that might exist for a wider scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Now I've got three more public questioners in the following order: Charlotte Dubois, Richard Wood and Josh Grantham. On submitting their questions, they were all arguing for substantially the same thing. So I've reduced the actual speaking time so that we can make progress, but their full questions are still published on the website and are available to members. So I'm just asking the three speakers now to focus on the key core to what they want to say. Charlotte Dubois, would you like to come forward? Press the button.
Thank you. Thank you. I actually want to endorse and emphasise every word that Linda has already said. Mill Road West at the moment is really very, very uninviting. So if the economy of the city is to thrive, it's got to be more welcoming. Nobody is going to want to sit in a cafe in Mill Road West, really long term, with all sorts of rainwater spilling into their cup of coffee. It gives the impression of being the result of a city that has no organisation and no technological nous. So to extend the improvements of Romsey, the final, whatever it is, 1/5 of a mile, is a no-brainer. You should do it. Thank you very much.
Well, punctually put. Thank you. Richard Wood.
Thank you, Chair. Ask members just to look at the question as printed. The city's gateway to Fulbourn Greenway should be a radically redesigned junction of Mill Road with the A603, in my opinion. It's currently unsafe for walking, wheeling and cycling, as a red, amber, green safety, not financial, safety analysis using Active Travel England's route check tool reveals. The current design encourages cyclists to misuse footpaths across Donkey Common by the swimming pool and Peters Field on the other side to avoid the junction. The plethora of curb-edge railings, a hazard to cyclists, obstruct pedestrian desire lines for whom crossings are hazardous and circuitous. If we take just one desire line example, to wheel your suitcase from the northeastern side of Mill Road to the Parkside coach stops, you have no pedestrian priority over the fast East Road, Mill Road, Slip Road. Await the pedestrian phase across Mill Road, where sometimes people incautiously cross to see traffic on A603 is stopped, only to find traffic from Mill Road is coming into conflict with them. Then a pedestrian phase to the constricted cattle pen in the middle of Parkside, where you wait the pedestrian phase to cross to the Parker's Peace side of Parkside. So will the GCP, with others, under this Greenway scheme, and now analyse this junction's deficiencies and fund
Thank you very much, Richard.
improvements to active travel? Thank you.
Yep. Graphically done. And now Josh Grantham.
As you now all know, obviously, the proposals here are for the alignment to only go down part of Mill Road, with the justification being that the station is where the existing Greenway finishes. However, as we've been speaking and hearing today, we all know that routes don't work in isolation. The original Fulbourn Greenway report identified the city centre as a key destination, of course. Previously, the route terminated at the station because it utilised the Carter Bridge, where at least onward cycling links are functional. With the new Mill Road alignment, this is no longer the case. Many thousands of users will continue onto the city centre along Mill Road as they do now. This is more than a greenway scheme, it's a major corridor for active travel and a key part of Cambridgeshire's transport network. The next stage of the project must not be constrained by previous funding, which was good to hear Thomas confirming as a design exercise, and the whole length of Mill Road should be included in that design exercise. It's not a commitment to deliver anything. Otherwise, we do a huge disservice to the thousands of people already walking and cycling on Mill Road every day. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually going to take all three at once, if that's okay, in terms of my response. This is a response to all three. So the recommendation put forward is to realign the Fulbourn Greenway, which runs from the A1134 to the railway station. That project has a defined scope. It should be noted the scheme will also link to the Chisholm Trail Phase 2, which is at Mill Road Bridge. And at this stage, that is what the design is to cover and recommended to cover. It's recognised that wider ambitions exist for Mill Road. That's reflected in the recommendation that we will work with key partners such as the county and the CPCA to consider the wider ambition for the road. And we also do understand the constraints of funding, which is why we would like to work with stakeholders, partner organisations, including CPCA, the County Council and the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I suspect the later discussion will return to some of that. But would you like to present the overall report, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. So this paper gives an update on the Fulbourn Greenway as a whole, with specific recommendations focused on Phase 3 of the Greenway from the A1134 to Cambridge Railway Station. Just as quickly as an update on Phases 1 and 2. So Phase 1, which runs from Fulbourn to the Yarrow Road level crossing, has been kind of given permission by the board to go ahead to construction. The traffic regulation order is currently in its consultation stage, which ends on the 20th of March. After that, we will look at what that has said and if necessary, bring back a further report or go ahead with construction. Phase 2, as stated earlier, we're preparing for a consultation on the plans later this year, and that's the section from the Yarrow Road level crossing to the A1134. The main focus of this paper is the recommendation to realign Phase 3 of the Greenway. As you can see on your plan, which I think is on page 143 of your packs, the existing agreed route links through a number of different residential areas to the Carter Bridge. That route has a number of significant deliverability issues, including pinch points and environmental constraints. And as you can see from the plan, it's also not a direct route. Following the installation of the bus gate on Mill Road, we anticipate the number of motor vehicles to reduce, which would enable active travel users to more safely use the route. This route is more direct and would link to the Chisholm Trail Phase 2, which is under development and you had an update on at the last meeting. It's proposed that the project team take forward design works working with stakeholders and the CPCA, County Council and City Council, to put forward possible street and public realm improvements. A formal proposal would then be brought to the Executive Board before a public consultation then took place. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. So now up to us to discuss this, and I'm proposing to do that phase by phase, which is sort of logical, starting with Phase 1 and working towards Phase 3. Katie, I know you wanted to declare. Go ahead.
So I just want to declare an interest in that. I'm the Petersfield Ward Councillor, and therefore I have met with Living Streets, Mill Road for People, and also Charlotte, who's an active resident, but to do with movement along Mill Road. But I've met with businesses and faith groups and carers as well, but I haven't met them to discuss their coming to this meeting. So I think I'm happy to be part of these discussions. Thanks.
That's great. Neil.
In that spirit, I guess I should also declare that Mill Road goes through the centre of my division, and I've had discussions with various groups in the normal discharge of those duties. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay. Let's go back to phase. Let's go back to phase one. You were indicating for phase one, yeah. I thought you might. So Claire Daunton.
Thank you. I'm the County Councillor for the Fulbourn Division, which is covered by phase one of the Fulbourn Greenway, and I just want to raise a point about that. As Thomas has just indicated, we are at the TRO stage of consultation, and the closing date, and I'm grateful to the County Council for extending the closing date to the 20th of April. And there have been some concerns raised, particularly in relation to the speed hump element of the design. It divides opinion. Those people in favour and those people who are not so much in favour. It's part of the original design, humps along part of the route, part of the original design. So I've got three questions for officers, if I may. One is, could the officers provide again the explanation for the need to place humps along the route? And I should add that these are sinusoidal humps, so very gentle. Could the humps, the second question is, could the humps be reduced in number, as some residents have suggested? And the third is, should time be available and should they wish it, is there an opportunity to meet again with the Parish Council to discuss this element of the design?
Thanks, Claire. Are there any other points in relation to phase one? Neil.
There it's on. I'll be very brief. I support the questions. Claire, I would have asked exactly the same question, so I won't repeat myself.
So let's go to Thomas and get an answer.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the rationale for including speed bumps, ultimately it's very similar to what we spoke about Melbourne and Meldriff earlier. It's about reinforcing the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit that's been put in place. We did additionally add some speed bumps which were along Fulbourn Old Drift. That was in response to the consultation that we held and the feedback that we got where there were concerns about the speed that people do along Old Drift. So those were added in response to that. What we did do, though, was we also reduced significantly the number of speed bumps that were proposed. So in Cow Lane and Apthorpe Street, we took the number from 17 down to 9. And they're now spaced at the kind of technically the maximum distance that should be in place for a 20-mile-an-hour zone. So we have taken on board those changes and we've made those changes. Clearly, they're subject to a live traffic regulation order, and therefore there is a consultation process that is ongoing. And then in terms of meeting with the Parish Council, happy to take that away and complete that.
Thank you. Any other points in relation to phase one? None. So let's go to phase two. Any points on phase two? Karen.
Thank you. It's not specifically alluded to in the papers, but I wondered, given the Tins pathway is obviously very close to the railway, is there likely any future impact with developments of East-West Rail as well, and likely impacts on the ability to deliver that path?
Thanks, Karen. Any other questions on phase two? No, just that one. Thomas.
Yeah, so we have responded to the kind of East West Rail consultation, and we're meeting with East West Rail colleagues with regards to the Tins Path Bridge, as the turn back proposed does go along there, and their proposal was actually to look at that bridge. They would have to look at it in order to deliver the turn back that they need. So we are working with them actively on that at the moment.
Thank you. Anything else on phase two? Nope. So let's go to phase three. Any contributions on phase three? Heather.
So my question around phase three, I can understand you can see quite clearly it's a more straightforward path over Mill Road and what have you. But I'm acutely aware that Mill Road Bridge is not an issue that is settled, and that there are proceedings going on at the moment. So is it not inadvisable to be pursuing this at this point? Is it not better for the GCP to allow that to follow its path and its outcomes before spending money and resources on what's going on here? It feels like this is too soon and that other matters need to be settled first.
Thanks, Heather. Anyone else? Neil?
Thank you very much, Chair. The decision to move the alignment onto Mill Road is a great decision, and I very much support it, clearly. And there is a bit of a theme amongst our external contributors, and I very much support that. It seems to be a no-brainer not to bring in that last link. And as I was saying before, it's about joining things together. And if you imagine, for instance, coming into Long Road via the Greenway, you have the guided busway, you get to the central station, you could follow that little leg of the Fulbourn Greenway and you get to Mill Road. Again, very short distance to get to the centre of town. And as Josh mentioned, already there's an enormous number of active travellers that come along Mill Road, and some of them going to the university, going across town, accessing Drummer Street and also the Parker's Peace buses as well. So in terms of active travel route, in terms of joining up with passenger transport, it really, really does seem to be a no-brainer not to do that last little bit. And of course, it would very much align with the county's ambition to support trading and the local people for the length of Mill Road, the whole of Mill Road. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Neil. Katie?
Yeah, I think it was very clear that the proposal is to move the route from the existing route to the station onto Mill Road. So that's why it goes to the station. So I think that's what the GCP was asked to look at specifically. If this does go ahead, then it does seem logical that we absolutely have to consider the western side, which is mainly in Petersfield. And is the county council in there, they have responsibility to bring forward a walking and cycling plan for Cambridge. And if the GC, it seems there's two ways forward. Either there needs to be an instruction for the GCP to extend the remit for the phase 3 of the Fulbourn Greenway, or someone else has to do the work to complete it. And would it come under the county council's responsibility to provide the walking and cycling infrastructure that the government have asked them to do? Would that take the cycling and walking active travel route further up Mill Road and ideally onto the bus station? The bus depot is a major public transport node, and people will want to access that as well as the station. Thank you.
I've got Paul, but I'm going to ask Thomas to respond. Oh, Peter.
Can I jump in, Chair? So I mean, in terms of Heather's point, the decision that will go to the board is a decision in principle of which route to adopt. In terms of money and resources, that would clearly follow the outcome of any clarification of the status of Mill Road before that's committed. So I can provide reassurance on that. And then in terms of Neil and Katie's point, I think they're sort of linked. And the report, it's implicit, but it's probably not explicit. So almost it's a question for Assembly members. I think where we're at is saying if you look at the alignment of the Greenway, for a whole host of reasons, it makes far more sense to use Mill Road, subject to the outcome of legal proceedings or otherwise. Nevertheless, and in listening to the questions we've had in, there's a very clear ambition for the wider Mill Road sort of corridor to be addressed. And so I think that the sort of almost the micro decision that we will go to the board with is Greenway realign budget, subject to outcome, and then sort of progress. However, and I say it's implied, I think, in the report, but not clear, we need probably to be very clear about working with partners, and it's not just the county council, it's actually the combined authority as the transport authority, where the money would come into the geography, to say, working with combined authority, county council and city council, let us try and be clear and try and get our hands around that ambition for Mill Road in its entirety, and then let's source funding to develop that and bring forward a more sort of end-to-end solution in terms of what Mill Road looks like. So I think that's, so it's not quite in the report, but my sense is it may well need to be. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Peter. I'll just get Paul, and then I'll come back to you, Katie. Paul.
So the third recommendation here is to agree to work with stakeholders to bring together a design for the Mill Road section of Fulbourn Greenway. So, I mean, I think I just had a quick look on Google Maps, and it looks like the Brooks Road to Devonshire Road section, I think we're talking, which is what we're talking about, is about a kilometre. If we compare that with Milton Road, that was 2.5 kilometres maybe, £28 million spent on it, and we're talking about £600,000 here. So I suppose the question is, should we be recommending that the design is started until it's clearer what that arrangement might be with the CPCA and the county? Because you could easily gobble up the £600,000 just on design. So I'm kind of questioning that recommendation, I guess.
Thank you, Paul. Katie?
Thank you for clarifying, Peter.
Oh, sorry.
I think as a city councillor, I really support working with the stakeholders, which is part C of the recommendation. Really, really important. And I hope that it may be on behalf of Cambridge City that the Shared Planning Service, with their expertise in placemaking and the work that they've done on making place for people, they might be involved. So I fully support working with all the stakeholders and trying to get them on board as soon as possible, so that at least we can have a plan about how to proceed, because I think that's one thing that people are very anxious to know, even if it has to be a fairly longer term plan, at least having a plan in place so that we know what might be able to be done early and how we can ensure best value for money, so that we don't have to take out things that we might put in early if we can do that. So I'm really supportive of C. But I'm also really pleased about Darren Green coming forward and raising the point about children cycling to school. They are incredibly vulnerable users of the road, and maybe at the very pinnacle of the hierarchy. There's many local schools in that area, and I hope we can really make sure that they are catered for, as well as the other areas of users that is being highlighted today. Thanks.
Thank you. Heather?
Thank you. So just in response to Peter's around Mill Road Bridge and the outcomes there, so just want to clarify my understanding and also endorse what Councillor Bear Park said about the money. It does seem quite a small pot in the grand scheme of everything, so probably needs further scrutiny of the figures. From what you've said, that means that we are sitting externally, waiting, overlooking the outcome as the Greater Cambridge Partnership, and the fact that these proposals are now, that won't interfere with the proceedings and what's happening in relation to Mill Road Bridge, and the GCP won't be seeking to influence that decision. It will merely be reactive to it subsequently. Is that correct?
Thanks, Heather. Peter, do you want to pick up those 3 points?
So the proposal to realign is based on the Mill Road changes happening. So we are entirely reactive to that. So we will clearly follow any legal process. We will just be sit on our haunches and wait the outcome of that. We're not seeking to get involved in that in any way, shape or form. It is merely a reaction to a decision that's been taken. At the moment, we're going to, if we didn't take this decision, we'd be proceeding on an alternative route and committing time and money and resources to doing that. No one wants to waste time and resources. So this is a decision in principle, and we would clearly await the outcome of that. The budget thing is, the budget question is very important. So all we're saying here is choose to realign, choose to reassign the budget. That is not to say that that's a final contribution that you or the board may wish to make, but we're not asking you to make that now because the work hasn't been done for a whole host of reasons. And it may well be that we come back, maybe in the autumn at our budget cycle, and we ask a question to say, actually, the contribution has to be more than 600, 1,000, whatever the figure is, and we've got a contribution from the combined authority or from the county council or whoever. So we're not asking that question at the moment. This is purely about, let's not stick with the current, let's take advantage of the change situation on Mill Road, and then we will, as officers, reserve the right to come back and say, we may need more money as part of this wider ambition. Does that provide reassurance?
Thank you, Peter. Neil, Simon, and Claire Ruskin.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for that reassurance that this is not the end of the story, that you will work with the county and also the CPCA going forward, and that this is actually more dynamic than it looks in some ways, because obviously we're going to be monitoring the roads in the whole area, and we're aware that there are problems with the way that motor vehicles access the central station currently, and that may be something that we can pull in together. Also the capacity for cycle parking at the central station, as well as the number of passengers ever increasing at the central station. So all of these things are ongoing, and I think we need to really think ahead and future-proof this. You know, currently we have 22% of the journeys that begin in Cambridge North and in Cambridge Central, and this is going to increase with the Cambridge South Addenbrooke station. So this sort of urban passenger transport via rail and how this interacts with our ambitions for the greenways, it's dynamic, and I think we should be thinking far into the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Simon?
Thank you, Chair. Earlier in this meeting, we talked about the importance of integration of the greenways into the city networks, and the map doesn't show those. And I think that's incredibly important, and we were talking about Burrells Walk earlier, which is a good example of that, and this is another. And I think that's why we should be supporting these recommendations this afternoon. And clearly, if we don't have a design, we can't begin to justify the additional funding that's going to be required. So I'd see this as a precondition, a first step towards establishing budgets for this work later on down the road. But if we just hesitate now because there isn't money in the pot, then it's not going to happen at all. So let's proceed, get the design, await the legal outcome, and then take the next steps. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Claire Ruskin?
Thank you. Part of our role is the what-if thinking to make big improvements for modal shift, amongst other things, but it's got to be based on evidence and within the constraints that we work in. We know that Mill Road is very narrow. You're never going to have that very comfortable space that's going to have buses and taxis and cyclists. And so there will be quieter routes that I think the children cycling to school, if they're not going to Parkside, will take anyway. Pedestrians, if they're not shopping, will take some of these smaller streets anyway. But it is obvious that cyclists commuting or going to Parkside will want to just zoom along Mill Road, and we should make it safer and better for them to do so. So I fully support the proposals. I think that unless we ask the what-if questions, we'll never get to the better answers. But we will accept that it's not going to be perfect for everyone because we're not going to knock down one side of the houses. Yeah, it would be unlikely to do that. So I support. Thank you.
Thank you. Claire Daunton.
I think I just want reassurance that right from the early stage, the County Council has been fully involved and the discussions. I think it would be really good to hear that. Thanks.
I think just in answer to that question, yes. I mean, we meet regularly with county council officers, and indeed things like our project boards and things like that have representations from county officers. So we are fully integrated.
I just wanted to contribute my view from a neighbouring ward, closely neighbouring ward. I first of all think that the case for redirecting the Fulbourn Phase 3 down through Mill Road is logistically, it's obviously the thing to do. It's not really something that there is a sensible case to do otherwise, I think. But I think that what happens from there, as I see it, it sort of joins the process that the County Council has initiated in relation to change in Mill Road, which is represented by the change in the bridge, and that was a County Council initiative. And in fact, the fact that we logistically redirect the end of the Fulbourn Greenway to Mill Road is actually representing an opportunity to the County Council and other partners, because it brings with it money that wouldn't otherwise have been spent on Mill Road, but would have been spent on a series of side streets. And that seems to me a really good thing. But I think that the stages where I'm just listening to the reports and the numbers and the forecasting that we see, the days in which we can add something substantial on to every single project, and it is always difficult to say when a project geographically ends and another project starts. Unfortunately, as far as the GCP is concerned, we're looking towards the end of our project, and we know that we're fully allocated and more. And so out of realism, I think that we need to be looking for other partners to be bringing money with them too. And maybe bringing responsibility for driving the overall project with some money from us. But I say from a neighbouring ward, and the fact that who observes ward boundaries when walking the streets, the points made by the public questioners about the need to do something between the bridge and the city centre, these are really excellent and important points, and we shouldn't get them lost through sort of the minestrone of different organisations that will take the next steps. And I think it would be important for the GCP to make sure that the message is passed on from what we've heard, and I think mainly supported today. In terms of what we... Okay, sorry, James, I didn't realise you wanted to speak.
Yeah, my apologies.
Go for it.
Yeah, my apologies, I'm still learning the technology. I just wanted to say we'd be very supportive of this as well. We have a lot of students and staff who come in and leave the university along Mill Road, and of course we use it a lot at lunchtime as well. So yeah, we'd be very supportive of anything that that improves the street for pedestrians and cyclists.
Great reinforcement. Are we going round all over again?
If the board accept the discussion, the points raised, maybe they could even consider rescheduling the phases, because it seems like phase 2 with the Tins Bridge and the East-West Rail and the Network Rail land might take some time. So maybe the route along Mill Road could become phase 2, and maybe phase 2 could become phase 3, because it may be more straightforward.
Didn't Thomas answer that? I seem to remember. Do you want to say again?
Yeah, I mean, I can repeat that, you know, the designs that we've got have been kind of significantly advanced, and we're hoping to consult on that later this year, and I don't think we'll be in the same position on phase 3. So at this stage, I mean, we can take both forward at the same time, so that's the current proposal.
What I heard from that was that we have a phase 1, a phase 2 and phase 3, but where we are at the moment is at different places in relation to 2 and 3, so the next steps can be actually taken concurrently.
So phase 2 at the moment has a level of design for the majority of it that is almost ready for consultation. Phase 3, what we are saying here today, is that we need to work with stakeholders to come up with a proposal that then would need to come back to a board to get permission to then go out to consult. We've already got permission to consult on phase 2. So I think the view is that phase 2 is ahead of phase 3 at this stage.
So I think that means that neither is holding each other up as we currently stand, because we can do the next logical things for both segments. Okay. Okay, so I think what we seem to have said is that we support the options and emerging recommendations at the top of page 144, which are the things the board are going to agree. I think that we could probably explain how we benefited from having explored that question that was just talked about, but also the question about the future aspirations for both sides of the bridge, in fact, and that we want to work with stakeholders to recognise some of the excellent points that have been made. So if that's okay with everyone, I will move away from this item and to the next one, which is the skills programme, item number 10. And we said we would take with us the quarterly progress report appendix on the current status. Niamh, do you want to introduce this?
Thank you, Chair.
So we have no public questions. So.
Thanks for confirming that. Thank you. So you'll see in the paper, we're setting out a kind of summary of where we are with the skills programme. In most places, targets have been exceeded. There's more detail in there, but hopefully that's a kind of good flavour of how it's been going. I think the Assembly knows that the work that's currently ongoing is up. The contract is up at the end of March this year. As a result of that, you and the board asked us to see whether or not we could avoid a cliff edge, and we could try and kind of extend that work before a longer term solution is found. We went away and we did that, and we followed the kind of proper procurement process, as you would expect. We received 5 bids through that process. They have now been assessed and summarised and against that criteria. And the current provider form, the future, is the preferred bidder. And from the 1st of April this year, for a further 2 years, that work can now continue. So hopefully that's really good news for the Assembly to hear, and happy to take any questions around any of that. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent, thanks, Niamh. Karen.
Thank you. And thanks to Niamh and everyone else for all the work in actually taking this forward. It's really good to see that this important piece of work is able to continue. I guess thinking about its future beyond this additional 2 years, I would like to know how the conversations are going with other partners who might pick up this work in the future, and also thinking about extending its reach as well. And then a specific question around, it seems that in the future plans, the work with adults has dropped out. I know that wasn't quite as successful as they'd initially from the future had anticipated, but it does seem quite an important aspect of the work. There was still quite a bit of uptake, and I wondered if that is actually going to be picked up by others, if there's been discussion around that. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Heather?
Thank you. Skills is always sort of, it doesn't get probably the amount of precedence from us as Assembly members and board members as it should, because obviously the transport is such a huge part of the programme, but it's always like my favourite part of the GCP, if I'm honest, is looking at the skills section, because it's something we tend to agree on, which is nice. But one thing I'm just wondering, as I said earlier on about looking at those advertisement of posts and how that may fluctuate, that kind of goes into the skills, and actually whether we are in a situation where if it does seem to be that the employment opportunities are reducing, how we are sort of supporting people to the right skills for self-employment. Because actually being self-employed it's not just the skill of the job, but also you might need some bookkeeping or some admin skills or other complementary things to go with it. And I think that is a key thing of what we see when there are ebbs and flows. So I know in South Cambridgeshire we have higher self-employment. That seems to be our base. COVID flushed that out. When it comes to giving the grants and things, we had a higher proportion of self-employment. But I think we are a place of innovation and start-ups and those sorts of things. But I definitely think that's an area that we haven't explored, but would be a good additional, because at least then people have the ability, if the job applications and the adverts aren't there as much, that they have the ability to go out and make something themselves. I am biased. My parents are both self-made, from self-employment. It's in our family's history. But I think it's sometimes not an area of our economy that we focus a lot on. We tend to go for the big growth, but actually it would help us spread the risks of our local economy as well if we've got more wealth being generated by individuals.
Thank you. Any others? Claire?
3 small points. 2.4, there's a typo, it should be November 2024. The question for me is, are we really amber in item 3, the early careers ambassadors? That looked a bit red to me, but light red maybe. And the third one is in the procurement for Form the Future, meeting the contract requirements again, has the work stream group seen the other applicants? Is there any thoughts coming from those other applicants that could be useful, could be considered for an additional piece of work possibly?
Thanks, Claire. Claire Daunton.
Thank you. My question, thank you very much for the paper, Niamh. My question is about the careers advice to primary schools and how you managed to embed that or bring that into the curriculum in a very busy school timetable. And I'll just mention one good example of that actually in the shared planning service, which Katie will know very much about, and the youth engagement service in the planning service. So obviously you've heard about that, and that seems to be a really good way to go because it doesn't crowd out the curriculum, but rather is something interesting and exciting and opens up the whole area of careers in the long term to children at that age. Thanks.
Thanks. I've got Katie, but I'll ask Niamh. Just otherwise, we're going to give her an impossible list.
Thank you, Chair. Karen, I think your first question around how it's going with partners. So the paper says we continue to kind of work with our combined authority colleagues. They are keen to understand how this work is working here and whether or not it can be replicated more broadly. We'll continue to feed into that as much as we possibly can, and they are positive discussions. I think colleagues are constrained about how much they know about their budgets, but they are very, very keen to learn from us, and we will kind of continue to feed into that as much as we can. In terms of adults, what your paper doesn't say is actually there will still be work with 16 to 24-year-olds. It's where there wasn't so much uptake with older adults and retraining that we're proposing to kind of skim the work back. So hopefully that clears that up. Councillor Williams, on vacancy rates, really good point. I think we can probably, as you suggested earlier, maybe include some of that detail around vacancy rates in the earlier part of your papers, just so you can see those for next time. Although the work that Form the Future run isn't directly around self-employment, what they are really good at is signposting folk to various other support. So we don't have the scope to home in on that, but colleagues are good at working that through. I think we can reassure ourselves. early careers ambassadors was your question, Claire. Some of the challenge around that is that this stuff is run by volunteers, so people have to want to turn up and do it. And actually, the number, I think, the numbers pretty good considering it's volunteers, but we are relying on that. They do have a pretty strong base, but maybe the number was ambitious. I think what we'll probably do is talk to Form the Future about that when we look to define the KPIs for the next part of the programme. In terms of the other bidders, what we could learn, so we have to be very careful with how we share the information as a result of the kind of procurement process. So we're not kind of allowed to share those more broadly outside of the procurement process. The skills working group will meet in the coming months to feed in and take a view around the next phase of what we'll be asking the contractor to do. And Claire, careers advice in schools, such a good point, and that's partly why I think you're still supporting this programme, is because we're all acknowledging how challenging it is for teachers to find that time to do that work. So Form the Future are essentially doing that instead of folk that are just under so much time pressure, and will, in fact, if not already, be linking up with colleagues in the shared planning service.
Thank you, Niamh. Katie.
Thank you, Niamh. Is this information is just the work for Greater Cambridge Partnership, so it's just South Cambs and Cambridge City?
Pretty much.
Yeah, and then, but I know that the Combined Authority are doing a lot of work on skills, and it'd be really nice if we could have an overview about what the achievements are here in the wider context, because it makes such a massive difference to young people to get these experiences. So I know the Planning Youth Engagement Service, they're enabling more than 450 young people in primary and secondary schools to have some time with planners and developers and builders and architects and engineers. I think it could end up being 600 a year, but also they have apprenticeships in the planning service now, and also in building control. And also last year we had interns from School of Architecture and Land Economy, and that was so successful that we're going to continue to do that. So all of these things add up to a great picture about what's happening here. But it'd be good to promote this, all of this more widely within the Combined Authority area to help enable any lessons we've learned to help other local authorities.
Thanks, Katie. I had a question I may have misunderstood about adults. What limits our work with adults? Is it that there aren't enough of them who are needing support in any way? Or is it that we don't have the support that would make the difference to them? Just interested to understand where that really stands in relation to the whole.
Yeah, so when the current programme was initially envisaged, it was in 2020, and it was as we were, I think, trying to guess the potential impacts of the pandemic. So in doing so, the kind of advice that we were getting from experts was that there were likely to be great swathes of adults that would need to perhaps retrain in new industries as we emerged out of the pandemic. This went some way to try and address that within the very kind of limited scope and budget that you were able to allocate. I think what we learned actually was that those kind of swathes of adults weren't kind of as voluminous, perhaps, which is a good thing, as we'd first thought. So that's the kind of that was the kind of genesis of it. So it was around demand, really. There wasn't the demand, I think, that we had semi-planned for, and we really didn't know what was going to happen. It was a let's just try and see. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other comments? Well, if there aren't, we are only invited to note the progress to date, which I think we're doing, and the proposed appointment to Form the Future, which I'm sure we'd like to welcome back to continue the mission that they started. And I'll find some way of wrapping up the various comments that have been made as appropriate to send to the board. So people are happy with that. I'll move on. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. And we come to our last item on the agenda, which is number 11, GCP SMART programme. I think Dan Clark is going to go through this with us.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to run through the SMART report, which sets out two recommendations. So the first is to note what the SMART workstream has delivered over the recent period, and I'm going to do a presentation in a moment which will go through some of the key highlights. To reallocate some of the existing budget, which is underspent, to 3 projects. And then also the report flags that the SMART budget comes to an end in March 26, and so we'll come back to the board in November with an ask for further funding. So a reminder of what the SMART workstream was set up to do. So it's to look at how we can use emerging technology and data to support the wider objectives of the GCP. So we work in 4 areas. The first is looking at how we can use data better for the GCP, but also for our partners, how we can make sustainable transport easier, how we can better operate the highway, and also how we can enable the next generation of public transport. So next slide, please. So the first part of that is better data. So we use GCP funding to build a network of sensors across the city. We deployed 57 sensors in all. Through the procurement process, we created a framework which allowed our partners to also buy sensors, to add them into the network so that the network could grow and that we could share data between us. So we now have over 100 sensors. Those sensors operate 24/7, 365 days a year, and they have over 32 different classifications of movement that they can detect. So that's everything from cars, vans, pedestrians, cyclists, and also we can pick up micromobility, so scooters as well. We have been working with other organisations, so CBC and the university are also looking to add sensors into that, and that allows us to then share our data with them. What we found was that we were collecting so much data because of the kind of breadth of information that it could collect, that it was very difficult for us to draw insight and intelligence from that. So we now have a data platform that we've procured, and that aggregates all the data that we're collecting. It helps us to clean and structure it in a way that allows us to reuse it and share it with other people. And we've also pulled into that other bits of data. So we've got a data set from a company called INRIX around movement of traffic in the city. We also have void data, and we have real-time bus data. And we've integrated the platform into tools such as Power BI, which allow officers to easily be able to create dashboards and to be able to interrogate the data. We also have put those dashboards onto a website called Cambridgeshire Insights, which is publicly available so that members of the public can also interrogate the data that we're collecting. I think the most important thing, though, is that we're supporting the GCP because now officers have a richer data set that help them to develop schemes, but also to do monitoring and evaluation. So we can see the impact that the investments that we're making are having. So if we move on to the next slide. So this is an example of the types of dashboard that we are producing. So this is actually the sensor data. This is on the Cambridgeshire Insights website. So you can go in, you can choose a sensor, and it will give you trends across a time period, and it will split out the types of vehicle, pedestrian or cyclist that's kind of moving. So you can get a really good idea about how the city's operating. Next slide, please. So the next bit is better information. So we have real-time information, and we've been doing a lot of work looking at how real-time information can help travellers to make better choices. One of the first projects that we did was putting the totem at the railway station, and we've recently refreshed that. And we've thought quite hard about how we present that information. So we tell travellers the next 2 to 3 buses into the centre of town, so that's the kind of top panel, and the next 2 to 3 buses to the biomedical campus, and then it will have the kind of normal list that you see on a real-time travel information screen. We also worked with Visit Cambridge, and so the bottom screen gives visitor information as well, so it's touch screen, and we've refreshed that to make it easier to read based on feedback that we've been receiving from members of the public. We also developed a travel screen which sits in buildings, and that's the screen on the top right-hand side. That gives real-time bus data, real-time train data, road network data, and then you can also put on there Twitter feeds, weather information as well. That was developed by the university, and they're helping us to roll those screens out. And we now have over 43 screens that have been produced, but we have another 4 that we're working on at the moment. So we've just been approached by the Bradfield Centre who want to have one in their foyer, and we're working with the British Antarctic Survey as well. As well as that, we've looked at travel planning apps. So we feed real-time bus data into Google, Apple, and we now feed that information into Citymapper as well, which means that they've got the best real-time information within those apps for travellers who use the kind of the bigger journey planners when they're travelling around Cambridge. Obviously, it's really important that that information is as accurate as possible, so we recently completed an audit of real-time passenger information. We identified through that a number of actions that will help us to improve the data that we're putting out through the apps and the screens, and we're working with the Combined Authority on how we can improve both the real-time data, but they're also re-procuring the real-time passenger information system this year, so how we can specify that to make sure that we get the best possible data at the end of that process. So the next slide, please. So one of the other areas that we've been working in is looking at the better operation of the highway, and we've run 2 trials. The first is looking at how we can better operate pedestrian crossings using the latest technologies, so machine learning and AI. And what it does is it means that we can see who's approaching the crossing, who's waiting at the crossing, what traffic is approaching, and then we can better operate the pedestrian crossing. And what we found was that we could reduce dwell times by approximately 36%, so people weren't waiting as long. And in areas like Hills Road, where you get big congregations, particularly of school children, mid-afternoon, you'd be able to operate the signals. So as soon as you got, big clumps of people kind of waiting and it became dangerous, they were spilling out onto the pavement, you'd be able to operate the signals to allow them to flow better. We also did some work looking at the latest technology in signals. So that's using overground sensors, which give us a much better idea of what's in the road and waiting on the pavement. So it's looking at pedestrians, cyclists, buses approaching, and cars. So we're getting much better information than we had before, and whether we can then use AI to operate those signals more effectively. This was a really early example of this within the UK. And what we found was that we could, at the moment, reduce journey times by 1%, and that's vehicle journey times, and reduce dwell times for pedestrians by 30%. But what it did mean was that we had more levers, so we could really understand, how many cyclists were waiting, how many pedestrians, and also the next extension of that is bus priority, and that's some of the funding that we're asking for, some of the underspend that we want to reallocate to a project within the paper. We think that that technology will continue to improve, and we're talking to a number of providers and looking at what the next phase of this work will be. Next slide, please. And then the final piece of work is looking at the next generation of transport. So in 2021, we ran a pilot of an automated bus, 3 buses. Unfortunately, it was during COVID, so the amount of people that we could have on the buses was restricted, and actually the length that we ran the trial was relatively restricted. But we now have further funding from the government through the Centre for Connected and Autonomous Vehicles and through business to run a further trial, and we'll be running 3 buses on 2 sites. So the first site will be from Madingley Road Park and Ride into Cambridge West and then onto Eddington. And then the second site will be running from Bayburn Park and Ride into the biomedical campus and then to Trumpington Park and Ride. We're working with Alexander Dennis, who are the bus manufacturer, and the bus that you see there is a brand new bus that they've developed. It's the EV100, so it's fully electric, and it's one of the first buses that's been produced with autonomy in mind. So it's got the autonomy stack on there, and we'll be operating those on the biomedical campus. Obviously, you know, safety is really important, so we're doing a lot of work making sure that whatever we do is safe. The technology provider and Alexander Dennis were also involved in a project called CAV4 in Scotland, and they ran 85,000 miles, or kilometres, sorry, in that pilot. So they're well used to using their technology is well proven, but to make sure that, you know, we're going to be running in a safe way, we have completed safety cases on both sites, and we're also doing a lot of work looking at testing in the virtual domain. So if you move on to the final slide, which just shows we've built a kind of a virtual world, and we're testing the vehicles in that world, and that's using data and information that's been produced by the vehicles. So they act realistically in that world, and we can test edge cases, so we can understand how the vehicle will react to things which aren't likely to happen in the real world, but you never know. So it's those kind of real edge cases so that we can understand and make sure that the vehicles are running safely. We're also doing human factors work, so we really think that, you know, some of the use cases for automated vehicles will be rural transport by driving down the cost of operating vehicles, first last mile, overnight services. But we realise that people have concerns about how they'll pay for the journey, how they'll do ticketing, and how they'll feel safe on the vehicles. So we're doing a lot of work looking at the human factors, how people interact with the vehicles and how we can make them feel safe. And we've run our first deliberative workshop where we got a cross-section of society in and who hadn't had any experience of autonomy, and we kind of taught them through what we were doing and listened to their kind of concerns and had a conversation around that. We're also deploying charging at the bus depots and a 5G network that will support the deployments. We initially had Stagecoach as the operator. We were going to use their depot, and we were going to use their drivers. Unfortunately, they dropped out of all the projects they were involved in across the UK just before Christmas, but we are onboarding a new operator at the moment. We can't say who that is until all the agreements are signed and the legal agreements, but we're confident that they'll be able to come on board and will begin to operate shortly. Other work that's planned for 25 and 26 is that there was a recommendation within the freight strategy to look at how we could begin to dynamically manage the curb. You could reallocate the curbside, so as part of the day it could be delivery, in the evening when you've got a lot of people coming into the centre using Voi scooters, it could potentially be Voi parking, or it could have other applications. And one of the other pieces of work that's flagged within the report, we're looking at how you could use AI in consultations, so public consultations. The Joint Planning Service are actually doing quite a large piece of work at the moment, looking at how you could use AI in planning applications and planning consultations, and we'll work with them, learn how they're doing it, what they're doing, and then see if we can bring some of those lessons over to the consultation processes within the GCP. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. It's very exciting stuff. Where do we start? We've got some contributors, Katie, Heather, Neil. Go ahead.
Yes, I think I just wanted to say, I wanted to mention about the work carried out by Shared Planning. They've had 4 grants from the government over the last couple of years, and what they're doing is have actually worked with 2 universities. One is ARU, and I think maybe Loughborough or Liverpool, to develop their own large language modelling, so use of data in sort of AI format. And what they've done is we've provided the universities with our information to develop a bespoke system for us to use data much more effectively in like AI. And it is very, very exciting. So the intention is to use this on the next big local plan consultation, which is in the autumn. And I would highly recommend that the GCP work with the planning and learn from them and make the most of the systems that are coming out. Thanks.
Thanks, Casey. Heather?
So yeah, I think, thank you for the presentation. It's definitely something of interest, and it's very much the way things are going into the future, and it does potentially make things economically sustainable as well, because so I have a train station in my ward, not a single bus goes to it from Cambridgeshire, but I always have about 70 to 80 cars parked at it. Interestingly, the car park's normally empty because you have to charge, where the Verge is for free. So as well as the cost, I think, of doing this, appreciate you're getting grants at the moment, but I think that will definitely have a big impact on the uptake. Just a couple of things. You said about the way that it's being modelled and tested in this virtual world, and you also said it'd be more of an option for rural areas going forward. There are a lot more hazardous, and actually we have a lot of problems with agricultural convoys, which has to happen certain times of the year, where you're taking the header and the combine, which is rather large, and so you'll have a convoy, and people don't understand that, and they'll overtake the first tractor, not realising that there are 3 in front. So I'm just wondering whether you're looking at that, and those, is that something that's been factored in these when you talk about things for rural? Because also, I take it they can be smaller, more like minibus style, but the most important thing at the moment is the safeguarding around our world at the moment is not the secure place that we would want it to be. And cyber security is something that we're having to become more increasingly aware of. I'm sure we may have an expert in the room, I don't know, but I think it's something that we need to be taking into more consideration with the more reliant we are on AI and what have you. That does not mean it's a bad thing, but how do you perceive that those safeguards are in place? What testing, what arrangements to make sure that things like signals can have such a bad impact on safety if there was ever any interference with it?
Thank you. Neil?
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got 3 questions, well, broadly. The first one is about the work on buses and things, and a lot of it requires that we have a certain level of control about where they go and what they're going to do. So how do you like franchising and the CPCA? The second one is about some of the other modes, micro-mobility. Given that we don't have a very good regulatory environment, and this is something that we are struggling, is this holding things up? I mean, for instance, in the guided busway, it's being regulated under the Health and Safety Act 1975. It's not even regulated as if it is a piece of transport infrastructure. And that comes into the last bit about autonomous vehicles, and you're talking about next generation public transport, which we're talking about, but 1991 there was the Parkway autonomous vehicle in the Netherlands, and 2016 I think it was the Milton Keynes study, and in Phoenix, Arizona, Waymo have been running taxis since 2020, and there are other cities that have been running them. So when are we going to get them?
Thanks, Neil. I've got Karen, but I'm going to let Neil tackle 3 at a time. Sorry, Dan.
Thank you. Thanks. Heather, the questions that you pose. So I think the rural use case we're not exploring at the moment, but I absolutely think that we need to consider some of the houses that you talked about when we do extend out into rural areas. You're right, obviously there's a lot of heavy machinery on the road. The company that we work with, De-Risk, they collect use cases and incidents that have happened on the road, and then they build that into the model. So I think as we go forward, yes, we'll be building that into the models that we use, definitely. I think safeguarding is really important. We want to make sure that people feel safe and that they are safe on the vehicles, and that's what the human factors work is about. How can we make people feel safe? And cybersecurity, absolutely, that's built into everything we do. So the technology company that we work with have cybersecurity experts, and they use a third party as well to do cybersecurity checks on the systems that they use. Neil, the level of control of buses. So the next kind of logical extension of journey planning is mobility as a service, when we begin to pull all the different layers of the transport system together and we look at integrated ticketing and how we can bring that onto one application as well. And franchising will support that. So we're in conversations with the Combined Authority at the moment about how we can deploy MAS to support franchising. And actually it will be I think it'll be a phased approach. So initially we'll help them to deploy a digital offering for when franchising goes live, because they'll need an app and they'll want to do digital ticketing. And then we can use that as the platform that we kind of build out from. I think waiting for the government to regulate micro-mobility, I mean, it's meant to have happened, but it keeps being delayed. I mean, it's not affecting the work that we do. We have quite a good working relationship with Voi. They share data with us, and they've indicated that they would be happy to integrate it into any kind of application that we build. So I think that's really positive. And yes, AV tech is actually relatively old. It's been proven. It's run hundreds of thousands of miles. I actually think it's the kind of the commercial cases which are the kind of difficult thing at the moment, and the kind of public perception and some of the work around public safety. So that's why it's important that we run trials. We work with local communities, with travellers, to make sure that actually we're providing services that people want, because if automated vehicles don't provide services that people want, then there's no point in having them. So we're really trying to work out where the value is, where the public value of those vehicles are.
Thank you. Karen?
Thank you. Just a couple of quick things. It's really good to see the work on the bus data accuracy going forward, because I think, as you said in the report, that is absolutely critical for people to have confidence in the system, and it isn't great at the moment, so hopefully that will improve in the future when there's a new system in place. Just something again to pick up on is the busway guidance. My understanding is that those buses won't be autonomous vehicles at the start unless that plan has changed. So where is the work in terms of looking at the guidance systems for the busways? I don't think you mentioned that, please.
Yeah, certainly. So, sorry.
In a moment, got Paul and then Claire.
Yeah, I think just to express my support for the allocation of the budget to the bus priority. I think that's going to be really important in the city centre as the busways are brought forwards, because there's no point in having fast busways and then all the buses get snarled up in the city centre. That's going to be really, really helpful to see what the outcome of that is. I think just picking up on Karen's point, I think, was about the guidance on the busways, and I think you picked up on this, is building confidence, people's confidence in it. I did hear during the consultation Waterbeach, Cambridge, concerns about safety. So I think there's a little bit in here about busway trials, but I think it will be really useful to publicise the results of those and and kind of build people's confidence in the system that's being used, especially if they're not, if it's something relatively new to people and then they've never travelled on such a system before.
Thanks, Paul. Claire?
Thank you, Dan. I fully support the work, as you know, and I fully support the Cambridge Insights as a good start to sharing the understanding that we're getting from the data collection. So the data collection has always been fundamental to understanding of what makes a difference. One of the things I'm really interested in is the Waymo trials, which are now way beyond trials. They are showing that the automated vehicles are safer by a considerable margin than human being drivers. So just sharing some of that evidence and looking around it, around the world, I think we could build confidence before we actually have the vehicles on the road here.
Thank you, Claire. Dan?
Thank you. So on the busway guidance question, so the technology provider that we're working with ran a trial on the CAV Forth. It was on the Forth Bridge, and they, clocked up thousands and thousands of miles and demonstrated that the autonomy stack that they're using within the vehicle is safe to operate and operates in really complex environments. So actually they were, coming off roundabouts onto slip roads, merging onto motorways, operating on motorways. So we're confident that they could operate on the busway. With the current legislation, they would need a safety driver. So they would be used for guidance, and they would have a safety driver who could take over it at any moment. We'll continue through the trials to demonstrate the safety and how their systems operate and how they could operate on the busway. We have actually put in for some further funding from the Centre for Connected and Autonomous Vehicles to do some actual testing in a domain that would replicate the new busways and to do testing on existing busways. So Fusion, the technology company, have done some work with First in Bristol on the Bristol busways already, and they think actually there's some savings that can be generated by using their technology on existing busways. So work on both of the busways will continue, but we have confidence that that system could be used as the guidance system on the new busways. I think on the real-time data piece, we're obviously doing quite a lot of work at the moment with the Combined Authority to make sure that, that the data keeps improving and that people have the best possible data that's available. And I agree, we really need to make sure that people have confidence in that data. Yes, we'll publicise the results of any trials that we do. I think it's really important that we demonstrate the safety of the vehicles and what they bring to the public transport system, that we're operating safely, and we'll kind of continue to do that. And Claire, we work very closely with an organisation called Sensic, who work internationally with a lot of the kind of trials that are happening. So we learn from those trials. And I think, we need to begin to kind of collate some of that evidence and communicate it to people so that they understand that this technology is maturing and is safer than kind of, traditional human-operated vehicles.
Thank you, Dan. Inexhaustible supply of contributors here. So Claire and then Simon.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make a brief comment on the real-time bus display, and I know that you're working with the Combined Authority to correct the problems at the moment. As a user and depender on this real-time display, one of the things that I think could be really improved is when it's not working, that it makes clear that it's not working, because it is very confusing when you see information which is wrong, but it looks as if it's working. So if that could be taken up, and that's on the real-time bus displays at the bus stops, but also at the park and ride. Thanks.
Thank you, Claire. Simon?
Apologies in advance, Chair, I'm going to be quite parochial. Following the completion of the Histon Road improvement works, the lights at the junction between Huntington Road, Castle Street, Victoria Road and Histon Road have been out of sync. And dwell times are long whilst people waiting, particularly on Huntington Road, wait for no vehicles to move across the junction. And I was advised that it was expensive to amend the software to bring it back into sync. And it was given that the works on Madingley Road were about to commence after the works on Milton Road, it wasn't worth spending the money on. And of course, there's now been quite a long delay with Madingley Road, and this problem has persisted. And so I'm just wondering whether or not the above ground sensors could actually be put up, the data of it analysed, and the lights brought into sync at a cheaper cost more quickly.
Thanks, Simon. Katie, you were saying.
So Dan, you mentioned integrated ticketing and bus franchising. Are you also talking with the rail companies about integrated ticketing? Thanks.
Dan. to you.
Thank you, Chair. Doug Blair, I'll feed back to my combined authority colleagues that in the new tender specification that they make sure that that happens. I know that they have had conversations before with the bus operators because it's actually sometimes it's the bus operators putting in things like cancellations that doesn't happen, which means that they don't appear on the real-time information. So that's in kind of process. Simon, the signals, as you kind of describe them, I'll take that away and I'll have a conversation with Richard Ling and the signals team to see whether we can, you know, what we can do to kind of help and improve that situation. And Katie, we're not having conversations specifically with rail companies, but I'm sure that colleagues within the combined authority are, and we're talking to them, so I'm sure they'll be fed into that process.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to draw this to a close now, if I may. I think almost everyone has had a go. So the recommendations that the board is going to be considering is to note the progress of the work stream, which I think we have done, and secondly to support the proposed allocation of funding for this year. I recall that this is not new funding, it's funding that's already in the budget, and you're recommending how that is allocated, and the three things being in 4.2 on page 159. I think we've spoken to most of these. I just wanted to pick out myself the one, I think the one about detection for bus priority is likely to be of extreme interest strategically to all authorities in our area who are looking for ways of handling the challenge of enabling buses to get through the congestion, and seems to me really appropriate, along with the other two. So if anyone disagrees with those, I'm sorry, but I think they haven't picked them out so far, so I think we're supporting the recommendation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dan, for that, and thank you, everyone, because we've reached the end of the agenda. Heather.
Sorry, could I just ask, Chair, for officers, so I don't know if it's the same for the city, but in South Cambridgeshire we have a standing item on our full council of the GCP and the Combined Authority. When the Combined Authority send their reports, they send the board meeting sort of minutes, but also the scrutiny and audit committee, and it actually just enables, obviously our council sent 3 representatives, as has City, but enables all the other members the chance to see what's happening. When the GCP send their reports to the district council, they only send the board and not the assembly. So I've requested it at the district council to ask, but I'm asking here as well, as the GCP, can we send both sets, because that then enables as well for us to be accountable to our fellow councillors at the full council meetings.
Eve, you wanted... Peter?
Well, we've been in discussions with South Cambridgeshire Democratic Services officers and regarding what we provided, and we'll happily pick that point up directly with them.
Yep. Jolly good. So the next meeting that we have is at 2 o'clock on Thursday, the 19th of June. So thank you very much for your contributions this afternoon. Have a good evening.